time round, I hear of people pleading to buy near-rotten tomatoes. Yet, I can't help but think it's still an example of the resilience people so often say Nigerians possess. The government has said things will get better and asked for patience, another trait it hopes they also have.
Simi Jolaosho in Lagos. And that's all for today. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. And we'll be back again next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme from our own correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcus, and this is Information Radio. Thanks for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, on YouTube, everywhere this morning. 3 minutes to 6 a.m., and great to be back with you. Thank you so much to Emily Brass and also to Faith Fundal, both who were filling in for me over the last couple of weeks. So it is a chance of showers we have in our forecast for us today, mainly cloudy, a high of 27 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. It's going to be another hot one today with humidity getting a little sticky out there this Monday. We're on air with you till 8:37 a.m. If you need us on the morning commute, 788-3093. Let's say good morning to the team. Chloe Friesen is directing the show. We'll be on air covering weather and traffic. Good morning, Chloe. Good morning to Sierra Sanders, who's behind the controls, our technician this morning on the program, as well to Brad Lillies, who is in for us this morning as well on YouTube. Megan Ketchison is covering for Heather Wells. It's the summer merry-go-round, but Megan's in with our headlines now ahead of World Report. Hi, Meeks. We're just having some trouble connecting up to Megan. We'll see if we can get her there. Megan, are you with us? And we're having some challenges there. For the latest news, you can go to cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, on the program today, I just want to mention a couple things coming up here. We have the Democratic National Convention coming up in the United States. We're going to get some analysis of that coming up and talk more about who's going to be speaking and also what's at stake as the Democrats meet down south. Their election, of course, coming up this fall, so stay tuned for that. In addition, here's something, speaking of the website, that you can find online today. It is an article about why kids no longer seem to be outside playing freely. So we have an urban affairs columnist, and he's going to be joining us on the air to talk more about the research he's found about why some playgrounds are more empty than they used to be. So stay tuned. That's all coming up. And we do now have Megan Ketchison with us with headlines.
Well, some evacuees from Bunabonibee Cree Nation say they're in need of better accommodations. An out-of-control wildfire forced thousands of them out of their community last week, and many of them are staying at an emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg Recplex. And the Mystery Lake School Division is hoping to help students make a smooth transition after a fire last month destroyed Westwood Elementary School in Thompson. I'll have more coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
We're actually going to hear from some of those evacuees in the program today as well. So lots coming up on the show. Right now, though, as I mentioned, World Report, the latest in national and international news, is up first.
Today on Q.
I can't tell if you're genuine or I'm going to wake up one day inside a true crime podcast.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Nava Mao is up for an Emmy for her work on the hit series Baby Reindeer, making her one of the very few trans actors who've received that acknowledgement. She'll tell you why representation on big and small screens matters.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will take center stage as the Democratic National Convention begins today. Delegates from across the country are gathering in Chicago. So are protesters who want to call out the Biden administration for its response to the Israel-Hamas war. The CBC's Ithel Musa joins me now from Chicago. And Ithel, there will be a lot happening outside this convention. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the big protest in Chicago will be happening this afternoon. It's led by a coalition of more than 200 organizations calling for an end to U.S. military support of Israel. Outside the arena, demonstrators are demanding an arms embargo against Israel. But there will also be delegates inside the arena advocating an anti-war agenda. About 30 uncommitted delegates representing the Democratic primary voters who opposed President Biden over his stance on Israel will be at the convention. Some are saying they will not endorse Harris without a guarantee her administration will take action on this issue. According to the uncommitted national movement, for the first time in history, the DNC will hold a panel on Palestinian human rights this afternoon. Palestinian Americans will be speaking there, and they will be pushing for policy change, specifically a ceasefire and an end to U.S. military support.
There's also a lot on the actual agenda for the Democrats. What are we expecting on day one?
Well, this convention really is about presenting Harris and Walz's vision for America and contrasting them with Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Today's theme at the convention is for the people. So it's expected we'll hear more about the social policies this ticket believes will help support everyday Americans. U.S. President Joe Biden will be making tonight's keynote address, and he'll likely receive a very warm welcome. Biden will be making the case for Harris and Walz tonight. His speech will also be a farewell to Democrats and a symbolic handoff to a new leader.
Thank you, Ithel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ithel Musa in Chicago. So far, the U.S. government is showing no signs of changing its stance on the Middle East. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv this morning, still trying to get a ceasefire deal done.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security.
Blinken says he's part of an intensive diplomatic effort to get an agreement over the line. The talks have been going on for months, and this week, mediators will continue their negotiations in Cairo. A search and rescue operation is happening right now off the coast of Sicily. A sailboat full of foreign tourists capsized and sank in bad weather this morning. Italian officials say 15 people have been rescued. One person is confirmed dead. The Coast Guard says it recovered the body of the boat's cook, who had Canadian citizenship. 6 other people are still missing. Italy's Coast Guard has deployed helicopters, rescue boats, and divers to search the water. China and the Philippines are accusing each other of causing a collision at sea. It happened in the disputed South China Sea. China's Coast Guard says Philippine vessels ignored repeated warnings and deliberately rammed into one of their vessels, something officials in the Philippines are denying. Jonathan Malaya is with the Philippines South China Sea Task Force.
This morning, Philippine Coast Guard vessels encountered unlawful and aggressive maneuvers from Chinese Coast Guard vessels while en route to Patag and Lawak Islands in the West Philippine Sea. These dangerous maneuvers resulted in collision, causing structural damage to both Coast Guard vessels.
The U.S. ambassador to Manila says the U.S. stands with the Philippines and condemns what she calls dangerous maneuvers by China's Coast Guard. In Northern Ontario, a coroner's inquest has released a call to action. It outlines 42 recommendations to improve healthcare services in remote communities. The jury was looking into the death of a woman from Kingfisher Lake First Nation. Her family lobbied for an inquest into the healthcare services she received. The CBC Sarah Law reports.
Ruth Ann Queequish died of untreated, undiagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. She was 31 years old. Ontario Member of Parliament Saul Mamakwa is from Kingfisher Lake. He says her death speaks to the need for a better healthcare system that is run by First Nations themselves.
Give us those provincial resources, give us those federal resources, and let us run it on our own.
Kingfisher Lake is part of Anishinaabe Aski Nation. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says the healthcare system is built, in his words, on colonial policies.
That speaks to just how racist this healthcare system that we're still subject to is. To me, that is the bottom line in terms of why Ruth Ann died and why so many of our people are still very much at risk.
The inquest jury recommended a number of improvements: more healthcare workers, better access to medical records, and support for patient advocacy. There are also plans for a new nursing station in Kingfisher Lake. Carolyn Leach served as inquest counsel. She says the process has been bittersweet. On the one hand,
the suffering of a family is required to bring public attention to an issue like this.
On the other hand, she's inspired by the family's optimism that positive change will come. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Federal fisheries experts in British Columbia are warning salmon are at risk. Low water levels after years of heat and drought are putting them in danger. As Yvette Brand reports, the warning comes as salmon are migrating to BC rivers to lay their eggs.
I'm having fun seeing this. Just a beautiful piece of wildlife.
People from all over the world gather here at a North Vancouver hatchery to see salmon swimming upstream to spawn. It's a tough year for salmon with drought threatening low river levels again.
One reason why this year in particular is alarming is because we didn't really rebuild those glacier-driven, snow-driven rivers. And so now we're starting to see the consequences of that play out.
Kyle Wilson, an assistant professor at Simon Fraser University, says landslides, silt, and warming water also harm fish and their fry.
They end up experiencing a lot more stress and potentially, deaths and strandings.
But up near Haida Gwaii on Sunday, fisherman Dane Chevelle has a surprising catch.
Checked, and there was a fish on every hook, so that gives you some sense of the abundance of fish that we're encountering up here.
He hopes the haul is a sign some salmon are adapting, but First Nations leaders like Eskedum Chief Fred Robbins warn their fishers.
In 4 years' time, if you catch a salmon this year, 4 years' time, you might not be able to catch anything.
Salmon lost this season won't be missed until it's time for them to return. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
The winds are shifting in Ontario. The province has announced plans to get back into the business of wind power. There have been no new wind farms built since Doug Ford's PC government took office 6 years ago. The CBC's Mike Crawley has the latest.
Melanchthon Township is an hour-and-a-half drive northwest of Toronto. It's home to around 3,000 people and more than 160 wind turbines.
We're not unhappy with the way wind turbines have rolled out in Melanchthon.
Darren White is the mayor.
The key, I would say, is that there has to be and continue to be benefit for the municipalities that are hosting them.
When Ontario's then Liberal government began its green energy push about 15 years ago, wind farms were built in communities whether locals wanted them or not. When Doug Ford became premier in 2018, he cancelled hundreds of wind and solar projects. That's why his government's newfound enthusiasm for green energy is raising eyebrows.
Yes, it was a surprise.
Jane Wilson is the volunteer president of Wind Concerns Ontario, an advocacy group.
So we'd like to see more of the existing problems addressed and resolved before we go forward and contract with more wind power sites.
Ontario plans to procure 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy over the coming decade. That's more than double what it will get from refurbishing one of the province's nuclear plants. CBC News requested an interview with Ontario's energy minister, but he was not available. Government officials say the province won't force new wind farms anywhere without local council consent, and they say producing affordable electricity is a priority. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Melanchthon Township, Ontario.
And there's more on Mike's story at cbcnews.ca. After 6 years of scrapping projects, the PC government reopens the door to green energy. You can read that story on our main page. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, a muggy start to Monday, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. 18 degrees in the city this morning. Great to be back with you. Thank you so much for joining us. This hour on the program, we're going to be hearing about a former Manitoba broadcaster and political commentator who's going to be Canada's newest senator. And as a longtime Conservative appointed by the Prime Minister, he's both shocked, he says, and honored. We're going to hear more from Charles Adler. Stay tuned for us. For that conversation, rather. In addition, this hour on the show, one of the world's biggest plastic-producing countries may be shifting its stance and supporting a global reduction in new plastics. We're going to dig into details of that. Stay tuned. It's all still ahead. In a moment, headlines with Megan. Megan Ketchison, that is, who is in our news department this morning. What's going on, Megan?
Well, good morning. A raffle for a new home in the Nishishawesa Cree Nation isn't sitting well with everyone. It bought a modular home for $200,000, and people who pay $150 for a ticket will have a chance to win it. The deputy chief admits there's been criticism over the cost of the ticket, which some feel is out of reach for people who need housing. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have moved into third place in the West after beating the BC Lions yesterday 20-11 in Vancouver. The Lions now have lost 4 in a row. And I'll have more coming up at 6:30.
You know, Megan, I have not been watching the Bombers that much this season, but I caught yesterday's game, so I picked a good one.
Oh, yeah, you did.
I know. So I'm hoping that that's what the rest of the games look like for the Blue.
No kidding.
Be nice. All right, thank you.
Take care.
Megan, of course, will be with us throughout the morning. Also with us in studio now, Chloe Friesen, who's directing the show today and covering weather and traffic, doing all the jobs.
All the jobs.
Nice to have you here early.
Nice to have you back, Marcy. I'm saying that on behalf of many people.
Okay, do I look still like a Manitoban?
You're a bit more tan than the average Manitoban.
That's because I'm an honorary Newfoundlander now.
You spend a lot of time outside.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Did all the adventure things, kayaked on the ocean and zip-lined in Petty Harbor, where Alan Doyle of Great Big Sea's from. That's the musical Canadian claim to fame.
Oh, I love it. Were you listening to Great Big Sea as you were paddling in the Great Big Sea?
No, I was focusing, and then when I was ziplining, I was far too scared.
Probably be tough to hear with the wind like whizzing by your ears.
And me screaming and saying, please, can someone go tandem with me? All right, what's it like here in Manitoba today?
Here in Manitoba, we're looking at mainly cloudy skies today in Winnipeg. A 30% chance of showers this morning with the risk of a thunderstorm. Those clouds will clear this afternoon, but we're looking at a high of 27 today. We do have that humidex in place, though. So, forecast high here in Winnipeg of 32. So we will see if we reach it. Pardon me as I pull up our weather, Marcy, as I am just getting my morning together here.
All your numbers are right. Humidex 32, a high of 27.
Let's go. Yeah. Sticky. It's going to be sticky kind of across the province. Extra sticky in Brandon. Sunny, hazy skies today, a high of 30 with the humidex feeling more like 37 though. So folks in Brandon, just be prepared for that. It's and in Dauphin, 60% chance of showers this morning with the risk of a thunderstorm. Humidex feeling like 36. For folks in Thompson, you're off the hook a little bit. Humidex of 27. So not too bad. Here in Winnipeg, at the moment, it's currently 16 degrees at the airport, mainly cloudy. And, it's a Monday morning in summer. Probably not a ton of traffic out there. I'm seeing a few cars outside the window here at Portage and Spence. But if there is something you're noticing that is getting in your way, you can call us and let us know. The commuter line is 204-788-3093.
6:15 is the time, and as I mentioned, Winnipeg broadcaster and political commentator Charles Adler will be one of Canada's newest senators. He and Tracy Mugley of Saskatoon were both appointed by the Prime Minister over the weekend. Now, Adler's going to represent Manitoba in Canada's upper legislative chamber as an independent senator. CBC Manitoba's Bartley Kivas spoke to Charles Adler about his appointment.
Well, I got the call 10 days ago from the PM, and took my breath away. Beyond being honored and feeling privileged and all of that, Governor General about to, make the official appointment, and the idea that I could represent Manitoba, which has been my home for most of the last 40 years, and choose to live here, and I've chosen to live here several times. I mean, beyond all of that, I got rather emotional because naturally, I was thinking about my dad, and I was thinking about my late mother-in-law and some other people who, took this kind of thing like really, really seriously. But on the other side of it, just the political side of it, if you will, I had such a hard time believing that a person who is a liberal prime minister, and his critics would say too liberal, would even think about offering this to someone who has been, for the most part, a lifelong small C conservative.
Do you know who nominated you?
No, all I know, Bart, is that there's an independent committee that meets when vacancies come up, and the independent committee thought I was a good idea. And I guess the Prime Minister approved. But I mean, nothing proves independence more than someone like me. So if anybody wants to make the case that he means what he says and says what he means, this is a 5-star case.
Very few people spend their entire lives with the same perspective. Surely you would acknowledge that you're not the same. You have not been espousing the precise same views today that you would have a couple of decades ago.
I didn't leave the Conservatives. They left me. I know that's a cliche, but it's really simple for me. The Conservatives were my natural home. Since I moved to Ontario from Quebec in my early 20s, became very enamored of the Bill Davis Progressive Conservatives. You know, the Peter Hyde Progressive Conservatives. I mean, in Quebec, there is no progressive conservative thing. You vote Liberal or you vote Parti Québécois when I was younger. So naturally, I voted Liberal. But I voted, Progressive Conservative in the overwhelming, beyond overwhelming majority of cases, no matter where I lived, provincially and federally. The last year of Harper, my heart was broken with all that business about the barbaric practices hotline stuff. That kind of stuff just reminded me of what was going on in the country that I fled with my family in the in the 50s. I couldn't believe that the Conservative Party, which felt like my natural home, would turn to the extreme that way. So, but if you're asking me if I've changed, my values are my values. I mean, Canada, what does Canada stand for to me? I mean, it stands for democracy, stands for equality of opportunity, stands for equality under the rule of law, stands for human rights. And I never thought, call me naive if you like, but I never thought that as a small C Conservative and as a person who supported the federal Conservatives that any of that, the idea that democracy or egalitarianism or human rights would be challenged or diminished by the Conservative Party. It just didn't compute.
What sort of senator do you envision you will be?
Honestly, don't know, because it's a terrific question, and I've asked myself the same question. And the only thing I can come up with is, until I get to meet the people, until I discover whether or not I have chemistry with them, I just don't know. And I'm not in Ottawa. I'm in Winnipeg. When I get to Ottawa and spend some time in Ottawa, I'll know. I mean, academically, many years ago, I didn't want to make a decision on a course until I audited the course. Once I audited the course, I knew what the professor was like and what the curriculum was like, then I had a much stronger sense of whether or not I could commit to it. I'd have to say it's exactly the same. I know that journalists don't like "I don't know" as an answer, but I don't know how to give you an honest answer other than I don't know.
I mean, what's next for you? Do you start looking for an apartment in Ottawa? How much of this, I presume you're going to have to spend part of your life there now?
I definitely want to have an apartment. I mean, I could live out of a suitcase, a few days a week, but I'm not a live out of a suitcase guy. I want to have the place to live just like I have a place in Winnipeg. And, that becomes the priority right now is finding a place that's not too far from Parliament Hill, because I'd like to be able to walk there. And that's important. And I do not want to treat Ottawa like just a motel. It's the nation's capital. It's where I'll be devoting a lot of my time, a lot of my thinking, a lot of my future friendships. And so, no, I will have, 2 homes, Winnipeg and Ottawa.
So that was CBC's Bartley Kives in conversation with longtime broadcaster and political commentator Charles Adler, who has been just appointed one of 2 new senators. Charles Adler will represent Manitoba as an independent senator.
The CBC News app delivers the answers you want to know and need to know.
What an extraordinary scene.
The breaking stories that shape your world. Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
Dropping the 8 now. We're just approaching Gaza.
Your source for mobile news. Delivered when you want, where you want.
This situation has changed very quickly.
The CBC News app. Download for free.
6:21 a.m. is the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're with Information Radio here on CBC. Nice to be back with you. Pretty nice summer Monday. 17 degrees. Winds are calm. It's going to be sticky and this afternoon hazy. A high of 27 with humidex 32, so it's going to be warm. It's going to be warm actually for a lot of the week. Hot tomorrow, high humidex values tomorrow as well, and then sunny into Wednesday. Well, I was mentioning I was just on the East Coast. It was hard not to notice that I was still being served plastic straws because here, that is, something you don't see as much. Next on the show, we're going to talk about plastics. Governments all around the world are in the home stretch right now of creating a global plastics treaty. It aims to curb plastic pollution. Now, that treaty is supposed to be finalized in November in South Korea. A challenge, however, is getting consensus around key issues, like a commitment to reducing new plastic production. That's a hard sell for some countries heavily involved in the oil and gas and petrochemical industries, including the United States. Now, according, though, to a new report from Reuters, the U.S. might be shifting its position. And to talk about that, Karen Wursig is with us. She's a senior program manager for plastics at Environmental Defense, which is an advocacy organization. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So when it comes to international plastics efforts so far and the global treaty we're talking about being in the works, where are we standing in terms of the various camps, if you will? So how has the U.S. situated itself up to now?
Well, there have really been two big blocks at the negotiation so far. There's the High Ambition Coalition, of which Canada is a part, that seeks to end plastic pollution by 2040 and looking for measures, legally binding measures across the whole life cycle of plastics, from production to the kinds of products we use, to the kinds of chemicals that are in those products, and then things like reuse systems and waste management. So that's the high ambition camp. There is another group of countries that's not so formalized. We call them the No Ambition Coalition, and that includes the big oil and gas producers like Saudi Arabia, as well as and other Gulf states, as well as Iran, China, and Russia. And they really do not want to see a ambitious global treaty on plastics. In fact, they'd like some kind of a light accord where countries do what they see best to deal with plastics in their own way. And unfortunately, that will not end plastic pollution and will not really make a dent in the problem that we're seeing. It will only grow. The U.S. has been closer to that non-ambition group. And, they bring a very big delegation to each of these negotiating rounds, but they really have not come to the table with anything helpful or substantive by way of recommendations on how to fix this problem. So this change, the signaled change in direction is really very big.
What would it mean for Canada if this is all confirmed and the U.S. does in fact adjust its stance on plastics?
Well, the U.S. is Canada's biggest trading partner, and plastics cross the border every day at every phase of the life cycle between Canada and the U.S., from the oil and gas that plastic is made from, to the petrochemicals, the kind of the building blocks of the plastic, to plastic products and waste and pollution. Like, plastic is very integrated between our two countries. And so it is extremely helpful for Canada to have a trading partner that is coming to the table with real ambition. In fact, Canada's take on production of plastics has not been very strong. In fact, the minister waffled when we were in Ottawa for the last round of negotiations in April. The minister was waffling on production. Oh, it's going to be too difficult to deal with that. Listen, if our biggest trading partner comes in and says, yes, we need to make and use less plastic, that is a big deal for Canada and a real opportunity to up our ambition and figure out seriously how to phase that out, phase out all the plastic production. We produce far too much plastic on both sides of the border that ends up as single-use products that we really don't need. So this is a great opportunity for Canada. And, for the rest of the world, U.S. is not only a big plastic producer, it's also a big consumer. And so this, when a market this size signals that shift, that basically tells the world, okay, we're going to start doing things differently.
Karen, what's the shift to what? I'm just curious if we're looking at industry shifting. So if oil and gas are going to shift to green energy, plastics producers would shift to what? What is the future for that as countries are making these decisions and looking at their economies?
Well, I think plastic production is very capital intensive. So we have to stop making new plastic production capacity and phase out plastic production. It's basically the plan B for the oil industry. If we're not going to use it to run our cars and heat our homes anymore, what are we going to do with oil and gas? Oh, let's make a lot of plastics out of it. Well, if we're not going to do that, that means we have to phase that out. We see lots of economic opportunity in things like reuse systems and repair. if we can keep things going longer, and unfortunately plastic is such that you can make a lot of very cheap throwaway products out of plastic that end up filling up our landfills and our oceans and our lakes and rivers. Or you can have services and jobs to run those services that reuse products and packaging, that repair things when they're broken, and that keep things functioning and circulating in the economy for much longer. And that's really the kind of shift we're going to need to see.
To what degree can this treaty that they're talking about being signed in November and the mitigation of plastic pollution actually be successfully achieved without the full support of the big players like the U.S., do you think?
Well, I mean, the U.S. coming on side will be helpful, especially if they take some domestic steps to reduce plastic production and use. But, you know, we've seen the most successful multilateral environmental agreement was the Montreal Protocol, signed in the early 1990s in Montreal by not all countries, by a smaller group of countries to phase out those ozone-depleting substances like refrigerants and things. And that ended up being very successful. Countries came on board. Those chemicals, the worst of the chemicals, have been phased out of production and use, and we see the ozone growing back. The ozone layer is refilling. So this is possible even if you don't have all the countries on board. But you know, you have big blocks of countries, big consuming blocks like Europe, like the African nations, like a lot of Latin America, and now North America. That becomes its own momentum to shift, right? Even if China doesn't sign on, if they're selling their products to the rest of the world and the rest of the world doesn't want their plastic, they will have to shift too.
The election's coming up in November as well. Obviously, the Democratic National Convention kicks off today. How could that affect the environmental policy or position in the United States?
Well, the shift coming from the United States is from the Biden administration, of course, the Democrats. We would expect that the Kamala Harris administration would follow through on that. We don't see any reason why they wouldn't. We're hoping maybe that'll get announced this week. Who knows? But we would hope that the Kamala Harris administration would follow through if the Democratic Party wins in November. If the Republicans win, it's a bit of an unknown. I have certainly not heard any positions being taken on the plastics treaty by the Republican Party up to now. I would anticipate that they'll take a different approach. And so, of course, you know, a lot rests on this American election, I would say, for a lot of people around the world. Yep. Certainly the plastics treaty and later in November after the election will be interesting if the Republicans win. And although they won't have taken office yet, I can imagine it will create a bit of uncertainty for the U.S. team. Nonetheless, I think countries are listening to their populations and they're listening to people around the world who say we need to make and use less plastic.
Appreciate you giving us time this morning on the show. Thank you.
Good to be here. Thanks so much.
That is Karen Wersig. She's the Senior Program Manager for Plastics at Environmental Defense and Advocacy Organization out of Toronto. We're coming up to news time at 6:30, and then we have business news and markets. But first, with a quick traffic update, Chloe Friesen's in.
Hello. So this started yesterday. Shaftesbury Boulevard is closed between Wilkes and West Taylor until the end of the day this coming Saturday, August 24th, and that's to accommodate rail work. So Shaftesbury between Wilkes and West Taylor is closed until this Saturday. If there's anything else slowing you down, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Chloe. Once again, that number is 788-3093. Stay with us. We have your full weather report for the regions also still ahead right now, though your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 6:30, mostly cloudy and 18. Mostly cloudy today. Chance of showers or a thunder shower. A high of 27. Some evacuees from Bunabana Bay Cree Nation say they're in need of better accommodations. An out-of-control wildfire forced thousands out of their community last week. Hundreds have been displaced. Lorna Weenus is one of many staying at the emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg Recplex. But she says it's hard to get rest or privacy there.
We want to go back home already. We're worried about our community and the people out here too, and they're kind of worried. And we need accommodations because it's been hectic for the past 2 days.
A sign outside the building posted by the Red Cross said a bus was taking 60 people to a hotel in Portage la Prairie yesterday. Another sign said a 10 p.m. curfew also came into effect last night, and no one was allowed in after that time. The Mystery Lake School Division is hoping to help students make a smooth transition after a fire last month destroyed their school. Officials believe the fire started in an electrical panel at Westwood Elementary School in Thompson. 2 other schools in the community will be welcoming displaced students this fall. Co-Superintendent Angel Bartlett says it'll be a hard adjustment for everyone.
But we're trying to make this transition for them as easy as we possibly can and be respectful of them and how difficult this is for them. I mean, you have teachers that have been in that building for 25 years. All their teaching materials, their own personal stuff has all been lost.
Grade 4 teachers Espetes organized a book drive to help her colleagues rebuild their classrooms. A raffle for a new home in a northern Manitoba First Nation isn't sitting well with everyone. Nisichawaisak Cree Nation bought a modular home for $200,000, and people who pay $150 for a ticket have a chance to win it. Deputy Chief Marcel Moody says there's been criticism over the cost of the ticket, which some feel is out of reach for people in need of housing. But Moody thinks the cost is fair and says this is only one way leaders are trying to deal with the community's housing needs.
People may not agree with it, but I mean, it's also fun and exciting to see who wins, and maybe it's a single person, maybe it's a family of 6 or 7. But I mean, it's an opportunity for somebody. Hopefully, somebody who's in really desperate need for a home wins it.
Moody says the community is in need of 500 new homes. He says the draw is only open to NCN members and the home must remain in the community. He says the money brought in from the ticket sales will go towards covering the cost of buying it. In international news, ahead of the start of the Democratic National Convention Monday, presidential candidate Kamala Harris accused Republican counterpart Donald Trump of punching down to shore up support.
Anybody who's about beating down other people is a coward.
That swipe comes during the rally in Pittsburgh. Both candidates were in the Keystone State this weekend, seen as one of the most important battlegrounds in the presidential election. Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, will formally accept their party's nominations at the convention in Chicago, which is also expected to draw thousands of protesters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv this morning ahead of renewed negotiations between Israel and Hamas.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security.
Blinken is meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as mediators insist they are closing in on a ceasefire agreement despite skepticism expressed by Hamas. Those talks are set to start back up on Thursday in Cairo. A threat to Canada's supply chain became very real. The Teamsters serving Canadian Pacific Kansas City Rail with a strike notice effective Thursday morning Eastern Time. And Canadian National Railway saying it will lock out workers also on Thursday. Both carriers have already been halting shipments, anticipating stoppages by their 9,300 workers. And in sports, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers spoiled Nathan Rourke's return to the CFL by picking up on the Canadian-born quarterback twice in the 2011 win over the BC Lions on Sunday. The Lions were embarrassed 25-0 by the Bombers earlier this month, and they lost their 4th consecutive game. This now puts the Bombers, their record has now improved to 4-6 and moved them into a 3rd-place tie with Calgary in the West. And that's the CBC News for Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Megan Ketchison in our news department this morning. And now let's go to Chloe Friesen, who's back with our regional forecast this morning. Hello again.
Let's start with Winnipeg here. Today in Winnipeg, we're looking at mainly cloudy skies right now at 6:35, 16 degrees at the airport. 30% chance of showers this morning with a risk of a thunderstorm. Those clouds will clear this afternoon. We'll see some of those hazy skies high of 27 with a humidex 32. Tonight in Winnipeg, clear skies. They'll stay hazy, a low of 16. Tomorrow, looking at a mix of sun and cloud, hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon, a high of 29 and a humidex of 35. And that's kind of common around the province. A lot of humidity in the forecast this week, making things feel a lot stickier and warmer out there. So Brandon, right now you are at 14 degrees. Today looking at sunny skies, some haze in the air there, high of 30, but with the humidex feeling like 37. So for folks in Brandon, you might not want to do too much extended activity outside with that humidex. Tomorrow in Brandon, increasing cloudiness early in the morning. Hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. A high of 29 tomorrow for folks in Brandon. Again, humidex with the humidex 37. Dauphin 18 degrees at the moment. A mix of sun and cloud. 60% chance of showers early this morning with the risk of a thunderstorm. Clearing this afternoon. Hazy skies, a high of 28 with the humidex 36. Tomorrow in Dauphin, a mix of sun and cloud, becoming cloudy in the afternoon. Hazy skies continuing. High of 29 with a humidex 36. Heading to Thompson, today you're looking at sunny skies, hazy, high of 24 with a humidex 27. Tomorrow in Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, hazy skies, high of 28 with that humidex feeling like 34. So that humidity is what's going to get you these next couple of days here in the province. Once again, 16 degrees here in Winnipeg. Not too much happening when it comes to the commute. I will just remind folks about a closure. Shaftesbury Boulevard is closed as of yesterday between Wilkes and West Taylor until this Saturday at the end of the day. That's for rail work in that area. So if that is part of your commute, you will need to find an alternate route. But of course, if there is anything else out there getting in your way, I would love to hear from you. No matter how you're getting around, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much, Chloe. Well, speaking of getting around, it is 23 minutes to 7 o'clock, and I'm about to talk to someone who's lived in a number of different places in Canada, Chrisley Ramlakan. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So I've been around Canada a little bit, haven't lived everywhere, but I had my first visit to a province I'd never been to, and I'm just back from vacation, so I'm very excited because I love learning about regional differences. So I was in Newfoundland.
Oh, wow. Yes. It's almost like a different country over there.
Have you been to Newfoundland?
I haven't actually been to Newfoundland, but I did live on the East Coast for 4 years in PEI, and some of my colleagues were from there. So we had a close relationship with them.
I knew that you lived on the East Coast, so I wondered. So the thing that regionally for me that stood out, there was a lot of things, and what a beautiful place. But for me, it was when I ordered fries and they kept offering me dressing. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So it's almost like stuffing dressing, but in a small little cup, and it's more just seasoning with some bread. And you pour it on your fries, and then you put the gravy on, and that's kind of their regional poutine, I guess.
Oh,
so
wow.
They probably get mad if I called it poutine. It's, but it sort of reminds me of like a regional fry mix.
That's very interesting. Yes. I mean, the food is very different and interesting there, especially because they've been so isolated for, for periods of time. So
the history was fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go. I don't know whether or not listeners have any regional things they learned where they were traveling this summer, but you can always call the listener line. You and I need to get to business and talk about the news this morning in your report. I know you've been tracking a possible work stoppage at Canada's two main rail companies, big news in the country. What's the latest on that this Monday morning?
Yes. So Canadian National Railway has now formally notified the union that it will start locking out workers Thursday unless there's an immediate resolution to the labor conflict. And despite negotiations over the weekend, the parties remain very far apart. And Canadian Pacific Kansas City has already told the union it will start locking out members this week as well. So this means the vast majority of rail transit of goods will grind to a halt unless there's last-minute labor agreements. The union, which represents 9,300 workers, also issued a 72-hour strike notice late yesterday. So the union says the railways are seeking concessions that could endanger workers' safety, but the companies say their offers do not compromise safety. Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon can order the sides to enter binding arbitration, but he actually rejected a request from CN for that last week and is urging the sides to put more effort into negotiating. Fraser Johnson teaches supply management at Western University, and he says negotiations like these usually come down to the 11th hour.
CP and CN haul about $380 billion of freight every year. If you want to put that into perspective, the Canadian GDP is about $2.1 trillion. So it's going to affect a wide range of industries: agriculture, petrochemicals, automotive industry, consumer products. So it could have a significant impact in the overall Canadian economy.
And the rail lines have already been halting shipments in preparation for the potential work stoppages.
To another story this morning, the latest inflation numbers are set to be released. In fact, tomorrow is when they'll come out. What are we thinking they'll say?
Well, economists expect July inflation to set the stage for more interest rate cuts from the Bank of Canada. So they believe inflation likely took another dip last month, and forecasters expect inflation slowed to about 2.4% from the 2.7% that we saw in June. So economists say despite upward pressure from gas and food prices, they still expect the annual rate to fall. And the Bank of Canada has lowered its key interest rate at its past two meetings and has signaled it will continue cutting rates as long as price growth continues to ease. The central bank's shift to rate cuts comes amid a sputtering economy as businesses and consumers pull back on spending, and a chill has hit the labor market, pushing unemployment up. So slowing inflation in Canada is part of a larger global trend. For example, inflation in the U.S. has reached its lowest level in more than 3 years. The latest sign that the worst price spike in 4 decades is fading, setting up the U.S. Federal Reserve for a rate cut in September as well.
And before we look at the market numbers this morning, there's a big sports media deal for a new streaming service now, and it's been blocked. So what's happened?
Yeah, that's right. So a judge has issued a preliminary injunction against Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery, saying the joint venture would most likely make the market for sports viewership less competitive. So the ruling effectively halts the company's ambitious plans for the service called Venue for now, and it was aimed at sports fans who have abandoned cable television. So the service was supposed to start this fall and offer games from the NFL, NBA, and MLB, but rival streaming service Fubo sued to block the new service, alleging the media giants have a long-running pattern of trying to suppress its business through anti-competitive tactics. But Marcy, the companies do plan to appeal this court ruling.
What's going on in the markets then? What are the numbers telling us?
In Europe, markets are higher. Germany is up. The UK is down. France is up. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is down. Shanghai is up. Hong Kong is up. Oil is down 71 cents to $75.94 US per barrel. Gold is down $12.20 to $2,527.10 US per ounce. And the dollar is flat at 73.1 cents US.
All right. Thanks very much, Crystal Lee. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Lee Ramlican from our CBC Business Desk. 6:45 a.m. is the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Great to be back with you here on Information Radio. You're on CBC this morning. We have Brad and Chloe and Sierra behind the glass today. So thank you for joining our team. 16 degrees, winds are calm. It's going to be muggy and hot into this afternoon. Well, speaking of things in the news, while the fire continues to rage near the now evacuated Manitobans Cree Nation in Manitoba, their chief is doing their best to keep their residents notified and safe. We will hear from him in the next hour of Information Radio. But across this country, of course, it is a summer of wildfires for many. With the worsening seasons, the government crews are stretched thin, and some rural communities are now getting involved in firefighting efforts in new ways. Now, this week, CBC's Climate Change Solutions show, What on Earth? Here's why a mobile trailer full of firefighting equipment is arriving in a rural community in northeastern BC, along with training on how to use it. Sonia Leverkus is an ecosystem scientist, wildland firefighter, and prescribed fire specialist as well. And Jack Thiessen's a rancher who lives an hour north of that area, north of Fort St. John. Now, that is where the firefighting equipment is going to be based. They spoke all about this with CBC's Laura Lynch.
It's a really exciting, historic day for us. The Peace River Forage Association and our team wrote a project proposal in December, and we were awarded a grant that allowed the purchase of 2 Type 2 structural protection units, which we've turned into wildland fire structural protection units. These are cargo trailers equipped with sprinklers, pumps, hose, all the gear that's required to assist in fighting wildland fires. We are bringing these trailers here to Northeast British Columbia to assist in the rural wildland firefighting effort, where we support the provincial government, but we also do require resources like firefighting tools and equipment to help the efforts in suppressing wildfires, especially in these historic times that we're living in the pyro scene.
And is it because it's so remote that this is an area that needs something like this?
Yes, I'm going to let Jack perhaps answer that about the remoteness.
This area in particular, this whole Buick, North Cache, and Presbyteau area, and is an area that's fairly wide. Like, these ranches are in these river valleys, and so we're fairly remote in regard to the ability for the wildfire service to access all the time. And so it's a big benefit. In 2016, we were able to be first responders on quite a few fires in conjunction with the wildfire, and in 2023 as well. And so for us to be able to have some of our own equipment here, right stationed right in our community, is a huge asset. These protection trailers are not just for my use, although they'll be stationed here. They're available for community use, so anybody can come if they feel that there's a threat in their area to come in and get it up and use it themselves.
So say you were going to go and grab it. How far away would it be from you to go and what, just hitch it onto a tractor, or what would you do?
Yes, so either I will deliver it to them if there's an emergency, or they'll hook onto it, and the community it will service is probably about an hour and a half in either way from our location. The trailer will be stationed in our yard.
So feature on one of the new tools to be responding to wildfires across this country. You can hear more about that on CBC's What on Earth on CBC Listen, or where you get your podcasts. What on Earth, by the way, has 2 new podcasts every week exploring climate solutions in Canada and beyond. And in the next hour of our show, as mentioned, we're going to check on what the latest is about what's happening with those that have been evacuated due to fire in Bonabonabee Cree Nation. And we're going to hear from the chief. Stay with us.
Food, art, music, dance, and more. Cultivation Festival FAMD is back August 19th to 25th. Proudly sponsored by CBC. Come celebrate Manitoba's rich Filipino culture with events taking place all over the city, like Ceremonia, an all-Philippine X art exhibit, Lupa Ay Bahay, a Filipino indigenous craft exhibit, and Sala, a Filipino film festival. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Time right now is 11 minutes to 7 a.m. A small mention here in case you are in one of the affected areas, or you know someone in one of the affected areas. I'm talking about Churchill. We are going to be off the air this morning, so you're obviously not listening to us from Churchill. But if you are in the surrounding area and wondering why, we're just doing some scheduled maintenance work there. It should last 2 days, and so if you're missing your CBC, you don't have to. You can always stream us online, and you can check it out on YouTube. You can stream us on the CBC Listen app as well. Super easy to do. Just check it out and listen live to Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and next on the program, everyone's going to be watching Chicago today. At least people who are interested in politics and the state of the world. Chicago's playing host to the Democratic National Convention, which kicks off this morning. Upwards of 70,000 people, as you've been hearing on World Report, from delegates to media and others, are expected to attend. Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz will take center stage in the Windy City. Recent polls suggest Harris leads or ties rival Donald Trump in most battleground states. The Harris-Walz tickets looking to capitalize on the momentum as they make their pitch to American voters this week. Krista Case-Bryant is a senior congressional correspondent at the Christian Science Monitor. She's in Washington, D.C. to talk about these developments and what she's expecting from the convention. Hi there.
Hi, good morning to you in Winnipeg.
Good morning. So what are the goals with this convention? What does the ticket need to show at this?
Right. Well, as you noted, they're coming into the convention with a tremendous amount of momentum, which feels all the more strong given how quickly it has accelerated since President Biden exited the race and the party coalesced behind his Vice President Kamala Harris. So they're looking to build on that momentum to show that it's not something momentary or merely emotional, that there's real policy chops behind it and that they can carry this momentum into the November election. It's also an opportunity for Kamala Harris to define herself anew since running for president in 2020 and flaming out before the primary season even began. So she'll be looking to show how she's grown during her 4 years in the White House and laying out some concrete policy ideas as she has started to do on the campaign trail. But this will really be a new opportunity for her and also for her and other top leaders in the Democratic Party to lay out the party's vision for the next 4 years and what it would look like with her at the helm. And then they will no doubt continue to underscore the stakes of this election. And I think what will really give us a sign of whether this has been successful, not just for the party faithful, but beyond that, will be to what extent we see them getting more traction in the polls among independent and swing state voters, because that's where they really need to persuade people to join their cause in order to beat Mr. Trump at the polls in November.
What do you make of the choice of location, Chicago? What does it suggest about the strategy heading into the November election?
Right. Well, I think it definitely is related to this overall need to win over swing state voters, including in key Midwestern states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. And, you know, we're seeing a number of signs of that. First, the selection of the convention site is very important. And I think, you know, while Illinois has been consistently Democratic, it's a place where Democrats in the Midwest can show, hey, we've got some real policy wins to show. We can highlight our policy differences with the Republican Party, particularly on issues like abortion access. And, you know, as the Democrats have drawn more and more coastal elites into their ranks and has come to be seen more as a party of coastal intellectual elites rather than the working class party that it once was, having the convention in the Midwest helps them to, you know, sort of reconnect with those working class and Midwestern roots, and to show, you know, we understand the issues that you're facing, we care about them, and we're the party best positioned to help you address those.
Conventions are always, raucous and spirited, and they build and build until the candidates speak. But I think that tonight, today at the convention. This week at the convention is what I'm trying to get out. When Joe Biden speaks, I think that's going to be obviously a real moment. It's been just over a month since President Joe Biden ended his re-election campaign. And a lot of people are saying, he's walking the line right now. He's still president, but and obviously he's supporting, the new ticket. But also all of his speeches, everything he says now is speaking to his legacy of decades and decades as a statesman. What do you think that we're going to hear from him, and what do you think he's going to, what do you think that reception's going to be like as he goes to the convention to speak?
Right. Well, I think you're asking all the right questions. This will be a huge day for him. While he will still be president for another 5 months, this is probably the biggest national stage he will have to define his more than half century in Washington politics. And define the legacy that's coming out of that. And he's had a couple of rocky months, and if he can pull together a really strong speech tonight and elicit, a genuine, strong, praising sense from his party, then he can put behind him the difficult debate and the internal tensions within the party over whether he should exit or not. There's a lot of reports that he's disgruntled about the role that senior Democrats like former President Obama and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi played behind the scenes to, essentially force him out of the race that he was really hoping to contest and to help the party coalesce behind his Vice President Kamala Harris. So tonight will be a test of whether the Democratic narrative that, he is a gracious elder statesman who stepped aside and put the country's interests above his own. We'll see how genuine that is when he speaks tonight and in how he is received. And then he's expected to leave the convention and go on vacation in California. And then it will really be Harris's show going forward from there.
And thank you for getting the timeline correct. He does speak tonight. I was fumbling with that a little bit.
Yes, it's a lot to keep track of.
Tomorrow night, former president, speaking of which, Barack Obama, you're mentioning, will be speaking. There's a lot of big names this week. Who else are we expecting to address the convention?
Well, also Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, former President Bill Clinton, Jason Carter, the grandson of former President Jimmy Carter, and other stars as well, Julia Louis-Dreyfus from the Seinfeld sitcom, and also Veep, which has felt more real life in the last few months than maybe ever before. Beyonce might even make an appearance. And there's also quite a few Democratic governors lined up to speak, including, I believe, a panel of female governors. So it will definitely, there's a lot of big names there, and there should be a lot of energy and enthusiasm generated by all those speeches.
Just in our last minute, I have to ask what convention organizers are saying about expected protests in Chicago by pro-Palestinian groups. And I wonder how likely division over the party's position on Gaza is going to play out potentially on the convention floor.
Right. Well, most people I've talked with don't expect this to be anything like the 1968 violence that we saw on the sidelines of the convention that year amid the Vietnam War. But there is a real division and a growing division in the Democratic Party over the U.S.-Israel alliance, which, of course, is central to our foreign policy in the Middle East. And what I think will be really interesting is how Harris specifically addresses the protests and whether she tackles their concerns head-on or tries to sort of sweep them under the rug.
Krista, thank you very much for the analysis. Appreciate it.
So happy to be here. Thanks so much for having the Christian Science Monitor in your program.
Krista Case-Bryan is senior congressional correspondent at the Christian Science Monitor. We reached her in Washington. Now, the U.S. election, more coverage coming up on The Current today. We're following our program, so stay tuned for that national perspective on the DNC. Let's get into what's happening in the news here in Manitoba. Heather Wells is not with us this week. Megan Ketchison is in with headlines.
Good morning. Well, people from Bonabonibay Cree Nation say they want to head home. Hundreds from the community were displaced last week because of an out-of-control wildfire. Many are staying in hotels in Winnipeg and Brandon, but others are in an emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg, and they say it's noisy and they can't get any rest. And with only weeks to go before the start of the school year, the Mystery Lake School Division is scrambling to find places for students after a fire destroyed the Westwood Elementary School last month. And one teacher has organized a book drive to help her colleagues rebuild their classrooms. And we'll have more at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
It's 16 in Winnipeg. Winds are calm. The high 27. It'll be sticky. Humid X 32. And we do have a risk of a thunderstorm this afternoon. 788-3093 if you need us in traffic. Shaftesbury is closed. Wilkes and West Taylor. So note that on your morning drive. Walk or roll. In the next hour of the show, why aren't the kids playing outside anymore? I know, they're spending more time on screens, right? Less time playing outdoors. But how can a city encourage children to go play outside? And what are the trends that change that? CBC Manitoba's new urban living columnist is going to weigh in. Stay tuned. We'll talk to him at 7:40. Also, as mentioned, we'll hear from the chief of Bonabonibay Cree Nation about ongoing concerns as the community remains evacuated because of wildfires. And after 7 o'clock, a really interesting conversation about fake job postings and how to spot them.
Today on The Current.
We know this will be a tight race until the very end.
The Democrats have been riding a wave of momentum since Kamala Harris became their nominee. But now that they're kicking off their national convention in Chicago, their focus is on how to make sure that energy wins them battleground states. That's on The Current with guest host Connie Walker. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Democrats from across the U.S. are hoping to win over a divided nation this week. The Democratic Party's national convention begins today in Chicago. It is a chance for delegates to recognize Kamala Harris as their presidential nominee and also approve their party's platform heading into November's election. Security is high around the convention. As the CBC's Katie Simpson reports, demonstrations against Washington's support of the war in Gaza are already threatening to overshadow the agenda.
We have here in Chicago one of the largest Palestinian communities in the country.
And in support of the Palestinian community, thousands of demonstrators are expected to march today around the secure perimeter of the Democratic National Convention. Organizer and Chicago City Councilor Byron Sigcho Lopez says now is the moment to try to convince Vice President Kamala Harris to embrace a new position. They want an end to U.S. support for Israel in the war in Gaza.
Democratic leadership must understand that the coalition that elected President Biden, including Muslims, Latinos, immigrant communities, we must make sure that the platform incorporates a change in foreign policy.
Lopez is part of the uncommitted movement, one of hundreds of thousands of U.S. voters who refused to support Joe Biden during the primary process when he was still the Democratic nominee. Lopez does not want Donald Trump reelected. He says it's an embarrassment for Democrats that the polls are as close as they are. But he does not think any party should expect his vote and will continue to push Democrats for change. Protests are expected all week, but the gathering happening today could be the largest. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Chicago.
For now, the Biden administration is trying to use its influence with Israel to push for a ceasefire. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv this morning, part of a diplomatic push to end the Israel-Hamas war. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem with the latest.
Welcome again to Israel.
As Washington's top diplomat arrives for his 9th trip to the Middle East since the Gaza war started, the pressure is on, says Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security.
The U.S. is optimistic a deal based on proposals from President Joe Biden 3 months ago is close to agreement, but significant differences remain. Hamas wants a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops and a permanent stop in fighting. Israel initially seemed to accept that, but is now insisting on control in Gaza, including its border with Egypt, where it says arms can be smuggled in. Issues that aren't impossible to resolve, says veteran U.S. negotiator Aaron David Miller, if there's a will.
It's a question of whether or not the two major combatants to this conflict, whether they're ready to do a deal. And frankly, I don't think anyone knows that right now.
There is much at stake. No deal could spark a much larger conflict in the region, as Iran has threatened to attack Israel, says Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi.
Yes, I believe if we get a ceasefire, then the threat of escalation will really diminish.
That makes continued talks this week in Cairo critical. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A search and rescue operation is happening right now off the coast of Sicily. Italy's Coast Guard has deployed helicopters, rescue boats, and divers to search the water. A sailboat full of foreign tourists capsized and sank in bad weather this morning. One person is confirmed dead. The Coast Guard says it recovered the body of the boat's cook, who had Canadian citizenship. Italian officials say 15 people have been rescued. 6 others are still missing. Ukraine's president says his military's operation in Russia's Kursk region is going as planned. Volodymyr Zelensky says the incursion into Russia is creating a buffer zone. Ukraine says it holds around 1,000 square kilometers of the Russian region, and it seized more than 80 settlements. Julia Chapman has the latest.
2 weeks since Ukrainian troops marched into Russia, President Volodymyr Zelensky is becoming more open about his aims. He says the army wants to create a buffer zone to better protect Ukrainian territory. Damaging Russian capabilities is also a priority. The Air Force commander says a second bridge in the Kursk region has been destroyed. Mykola Leschuk says the move will disrupt Russian logistics. Ukraine has thrown significant manpower at the Kursk offensive, but that is triggering repercussions elsewhere. There are signs that Russia is making gains near the Donbas city of Pokrovsk, with nearby Toretsk also under heavy attack. And in the meantime, drones and missiles are being exchanged. Air raid sirens have been sounding all morning in Kursk, warning residents of incoming rocket fire from Ukraine. And the Ukrainian Air Force says it intercepted 11 Shahed drones launched by Russia this morning. On Sunday, a border village in the Sumy region was targeted with a Russian-guided aerial bomb. Its mayor says a TV tower and a family home were hit, killing a man and injuring his young daughter. A relative arriving at the scene had to be consoled by emergency services. It's because of attacks like these that Ukraine wants to push the front line further from its own settlements and deeper into Russian ones. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
In Calcutta,
we want justice. We want justice. We want justice. We want justice.
hundreds of lawyers are joining the ongoing protests by healthcare workers. They're calling for justice for the 31-year-old trainee doctor who was raped and murdered. It happened inside a state-run hospital and medical college just over a week ago. This lawyer says India's government needs to do more.
We want the justice to be served for the victim of Arjikar. Government has become so insensitive that in spite of all odds, everything, what's happening all around, the government has not shown a little bit sense of concern over this matter. So the moot question is now whether the victim would get justice or not. And that is what our demand is.
Some doctors across the country have been turning away non-emergency patients. They are demanding immediate action, including CCTVs in all medical facilities and increased security. Canada's two largest railroads are starting to shut down their shipping networks. A labor dispute with the union representing workers could cause either a lockout or a strike early Thursday. The union served CPKC a 72-hour strike notice yesterday. If there's no deal, CN says it would lock out workers starting Thursday morning. A long work stoppage could disrupt cross-border trade with the U.S. After a centuries-long fight, the people of the Caldwell First Nation are going home. The First Nation's ancestral lands in southwestern Ontario were taken by settlers. For 230 years, people in the community have fought to reclaim their part of the region. Now, they are finally moving back. The CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa has their story.
Darrell Vaughn and her twin girls are playing with toy blocks. They're on their living room floor in their new home. The family from Windsor is one of the first to move onto Caldwell First Nations Reserve. Vaughn sees it as a way to finally connect with her culture.
I missed out on 20 years of learning our language, learning traditions.
And while she didn't have the chance, she's happy that her daughters will grow up knowing the ways of Caldwell.
We get to go make them moccasins. We get to go make them ribbon skirts. Even those small things are so big. I never got to do that.
A long history of colonization stripped Caldwell of its lands, which stretched from the mouth of the Detroit River along the north shore of Lake Erie. After settling a land claim in 2011, the First Nation bought an empty plot in southwestern Ontario and started building.
I wanted this all my life.
Former Caldwell chief Larry Johnson holds back tears. He was part of many formal land claims that began decades ago, and now the community he dreamed of is a reality.
It's good times for everybody.
I just have gratitude.
Chief Mary Duckworth is soaking in this hard-earned moment, but she's also thinking about the future.
I see just real community values sharing with each other, taking care of each other.
By mid-September, there will be 60 people living on the reserve. Eventually, Caldwell hopes to build more homes, a community center, and a school. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Caldwell First Nation.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here at Information Radio. Nice to be back with you on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. It's going to be hot again this morning, 16 degrees and just minor issues on your morning commute. Chloe Friesen's in a moment to run us through what's going on this Monday morning. This hour on the program, we're going to hear about a recent survey from the career site Resume Builder. This is super interesting. It says 40% of companies in the U.S. and here in Canada have admitted to posting fake job listings this year. So the 40% number is out of the U.S., but here in Canada, it's something that's being seen as well. We're going to take a closer look at why that might be happening and what to do about it. In addition, this hour on the show, kids are spending more time on screens and less time playing outside. How can a city encourage kids to hit the outdoors? Stay tuned. My CBC Manitoba's urban living columnist is going to weigh in with us. And I also just posted this on Facebook because I think it's a really good question we can probably all get into. So my Marcy Marcusa page during the show will act as a show page. You can weigh in there if you want to hit us up on Facebook if you're listening and you want to weigh in. You can read the article first on our CBC Manitoba website all about this. It looks at, as I mentioned, why kids aren't playing outside like they did in previous generations. But we're wondering what your sense of it is in your own family. How do you make those decisions and why is less play outside happen? Or maybe it hasn't. Maybe you found a way to encourage that for happening again. So let us know. You can write to us there. You can also always call us if you'd rather pick up the phone, 788-3205. We can take some listener lines and get your calls on the air. It is time, though, first to check in with Megan Ketchison, who's here with our morning headlines.
Well, good morning. People in McCreary area are shaken after 4 people were found dead on Friday. RCMP are investigating a triple homicide. Police say the 4th person died of self-inflicted injuries. Now, we'll hear from the mayor of the neighboring community of St. Rose, who says it's rattled everyone in the region. And in northern Manitoba, First Nation is trying to get creative to address the housing issues in the community. It's raffling off a modular home, but the raffle isn't sitting well with those who think the $150 ticket for the raffle is out of reach for some band members. And we'll have more at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Chloe Friesen, as mentioned, is in now to talk about what's going on in our forecast with some more detail and, of course, the morning commute as well. Hi, Chloe.
Good morning. We're going to start in Brandon. Currently 14 degrees at the Brandon Airport, partly cloudy for you folks. We're looking at sunny skies today. A bit of that leftover haze. I know I definitely smelt it in the air and kind of felt it here in Winnipeg a couple of days ago. And so that is just lingering haze from wildfire smoke. High today for Brandon of 30 degrees with the humidex feeling more like 37. So prepare yourself for that and probably the stickiness that comes with it. Tomorrow in Brandon, increasing cloudiness early in the morning, hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. Tomorrow in Brandon, high of 29 and with the humidex 37. For folks in Dauphin, hello, good morning. 17 degrees, mostly cloudy at the moment. Today, looking at a mix of sun and cloud, 60% chance of showers early this morning with a risk of a thunderstorm. Clearing up this afternoon, hazy skies, a high of 28, feeling more like 36 with a humidex for you folks in Dauphin. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, becoming cloudy in the afternoon. Hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40, and very similar temperatures, high of 29, humidex of 36 tomorrow in Dauphin. For folks in Thompson, mostly cloudy skies, currently 11 degrees. Today, sunny, hazy skies, a high of 24, with the humidex feeling more like 27. Tomorrow in Thompson, mix of sun and cloud, hazy, high of 28. Feeling more like 34. Here in Winnipeg at the Forks, it is 17 degrees. We're looking at mainly cloudy skies today with a 30% chance of showers this morning with the risk of a thunderstorm. We'll see that clear up this afternoon. Hazy skies, high of 27, feeling like 32 with a humidex. Tonight in Winnipeg, clear skies, hazy, an overnight low of 16. And tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. A high of 29 tomorrow here in Winnipeg, but it will feel more like 35 with the Humidex. Not too much going on when it comes to the commute. No calls on the commuter lines so far here. I'll remind folks about Shaftesbury.
Yeah, these are the quietest 2 weeks of the year always, because everyone's trying to squeak out summer and like finish off what they
gone.
did.
Yep.
Trying to get those days off.
Yeah, but perhaps your summer activities involve driving on Shaftesbury Boulevard. I don't know.
Don't go there.
Between Wilkes and West Taylor, it is closed for to accommodate rail work, and that's until the end of the day this Saturday. If there just happens to be something that is getting in your way today, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093.
7:15 is the time right now, and up next on the show, as I alluded to at the top of the hour here, if a job posting looks too good to be true, it probably is. So a recent survey by the site Resume Builder did find that 40% of United States companies have posted fake job listings this year. And 30% are currently advertising positions that don't actually exist. For more on why a business might do this and also how this is presenting in Canada, I spoke with Laura Williams. She's a managing partner of Williams HR Law, LLP, and CEO of Williams HR Consulting, Inc.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you doing?
I'm well, but this is confounding to me. Why would a company post a job listing if they don't actually intend to hire anyone for the role?
Well, employers engage in the practice of posting what's referred to as fake jobs or ghost jobs for a variety of reasons. And some of them are related to just how challenging the labor market has been recently. So it's to conduct sometimes market research to gauge the availability of talent in the market and understand current trends, including salary expectations, and to test how their company is perceived by job seekers. Also to keep the talent pipeline flowing to ensure that they have an active pool of job candidates so they can move quickly when the need arises. Sometimes also they have requirements internally connected to their policies to post jobs publicly, even when they have an internal candidate in mind. And this isn't that uncommon in government or unionized environments. And then there are the optics. Externally, to look like their company's growing and thriving and creating opportunities and to bolster brand awareness. And also internally, sometimes the driver involves placating overextended employees by making them feel their workloads will soon be alleviated or that help is on the way. So there are a variety of motivators.
We talked about the fact, or in the introduction, I mentioned that this survey was American, done in the States. How much of an issue do you think this is in Canada?
I think it's trending in Canada as well for similar reasons. Tight, challenging talent market and employers wanting to test it, and also for certain industries where there might be a lot of churn or it's difficult to find candidates. That motivator of keeping the talent pipeline flowing is a strong one.
How do fake job postings affect job seekers? I mean, I can't imagine the disappointment.
Huge disappointment, related to the obvious kind of wasted time and effort in tailoring resumes and cover letters for specific roles. Also, though, the delays in employment, particularly for those who are unemployed or underemployed, can have financial ramifications. It also creates skews and distortions of the market. So, it can make job seekers not have a real understanding of the availability of certain roles or what salary ranges are or the demand for specific skills. And this just creates false hope and can impact self-esteem. So, any individual that's constantly applying for and not hearing back can lead them to feel that their qualifications don't have worth in the job market. But, there's also another implication that flows both ways, because all of this leads to eroded trust, and then not only in the job market, but also towards certain employers, and this can be reputationally harmful for companies.
So what are the red flags? Are there specific red flags or signs that might indicate a job posting isn't genuine?
Oh, definitely. I mean, where you have a posting that's been up for a long period of time, for months, with the posting not being filled, where it's been frequently reposted, so the same job is, you see it's being constantly refreshed. Now, some job boards that they do want to keep the postings fresh, but that frequent reposting is also a sign. When the job description's really generic and high level and vague, speaking more about kind of what you're going to get rather than what the requirements are for the role, and also where the candidate or the applicant isn't really experiencing progress in the hiring process. So there's a lack of follow-up after applying, or there's constant delaying or stalling of interviews being scheduled. That's also a sign. And finally, where there's no clear urgency, or if there's not a hiring timeline. So there's no deadline for applications, or if there's an indefinite start date kind of indicated by a TBD. All of these can be indications that a job posting may not be legit.
How can someone verify the legitimacy of a job posting before they even apply? Like, are there questions that you would say people could ask?
Well, if you can get any information about who the hiring manager is or who the contact in HR may be, then, the best thing to do is to reach out and ask specific questions. And there's not a lot of downside to that, because that does show that you may be really interested in the role, and that if you have an opportunity to even quickly showcase that there could be alignment in skill and need, then that could go a long way. But research can also go a long way. So, look at the company website. Is the job also posted there? Look at their online presence. Is the hiring manager in HR, are they also posting about the job? Or are there reviews on platforms like Glassdoor that speak to other applicants' experiences of just going through the churn? And, also the news indicates sometimes what companies are going through. So have they been laying off, or is there a hiring freeze or restructuring? And all of these can be indications as to whether or not a company genuinely needs talent.
And just on the other side, how can companies improve their hiring practices to avoid creating misleading, at least, job postings?
Well, companies should provide as much information about the role as possible. So include when the application period closes and when the company hopes to fill the role. Add the job to the company website, which helps to bolster the optic of legitimacy, but also give a lot of detail about the recruitment process. So what comes next after the application phase, and what a prospective employee can experience or will likely experience through the recruitment cycle.
Thank you very much for highlighting this and helping us understand it better. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Laura Williams, I spoke with her recently. She's a managing partner of Williams HR Law LLP and CEO of Williams HR Consulting, Inc., talking about fake job postings. It is 7:22 a.m. right now, 17 degrees in Winnipeg. And if you're a music lover, you love this time of year, because we're officially under a month from learning who is going to win Canada's 2024 Polaris Music Prize. And if you want to download some great music, CBC Music has a shortlist shortcuts so you can amp up what you've got on your own devices. As you can imagine, Charlotte Cardin, who has had a monstrous year, is up on that short list. Here's her song this morning, Jim Carrey.
Call me when you get this. I've been thinking a little recklessly, checking off a hit list, acting like I'm headless. I don't wanna let this be, and I've been running endlessly, and this got it by my jealousy. It's like my dreams are turning on me. I'm my worst enemy. This may be the end of me. I got so many personalities.
Jim Carrey. She's shortlisted for the Polaris Music Prize. We'll find out who wins that in about a month from now. But if you want to download her music or any of the other shortlisters, check out what is online and put together. You can find the Music Shortlist Shortcut series on Instagram, TikTok, and on YouTube as well. So you can check it out. It is 7:26 a.m. on your Monday morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us this morning on Information Radio here on CBC. It is going to be a hot day ahead, a high of 27 with Humidex 32, and it's going to be hot across the province, in fact. Well, next on the show, it's time for morning sports, and Paul McGowan's in with sports today. Hello there.
Hi, Marcy.
So I gotta say, I don't know if I'm the good luck charm or not, Paul, but I haven't watched many Bomber games, maybe part of one earlier, and last night I watched that whole game and I thought, oh, they look pretty good, and they needed to. Comebacks, the theme between the Bombers and the Lions yesterday, hey?
There were a couple of comebacks, yes. Winnipeg downs the BC Lions 20-11. Now, most of the headlines around the league were about the return of Nathan Rourke. The Bombers, though, had a comeback as well with the return of Kenny Lawler coming back from that fractured arm. Lawler, with definitely the better comeback last night, was second on the team in receiving yards, even if he didn't record a touchdown. Now, Nathan Rourke, on the other hand, a terrible night, threw for only 126 yards, completed less than a third of his passes. And a part of that could be attributed to him just getting back to Canada, just getting familiar with the BC offense. But Winnipeg's defense also played a major part in that. It's something defensive lineman Willie Jefferson told TSN was inspired by the heralded return of Nathan Rourke.
Anytime the media, hypes up a quarterback or anybody going against us and stuff like that, we take that as, fuel to the fire and do all that good stuff. But, man, we knew Nathan is a good quarterback. We know what he did when he was here. Him being in the NFL, coming back, brought a little bit more to his game and things like that. But all we wanted to do was come out here, play Winnipeg football, and, we had a good game.
The Bombers once again tied with Calgary for third in the West. And with the Stamps on a bye week, a win for the Bombers on Friday would give them sole possession of that final playoff spot as they head into the Labor Day Classic.
Come on, Bombers. Let's go to soccer now. A unique idea to keep players rested.
This is part of an ongoing conversation about how much soccer is too much soccer. We have this expanded international window now, the new Intercontinental Cup in December, an expanded Club World Cup, and it has managers like Carlo Ancelotti of Real Madrid wondering how to keep his players healthy and rested.
We are thinking during parts of the season to give players individual holidays. Vinicius, for instance, goes with his national team, plays 2 matches, he goes on holiday, then he comes back. It's the only way, because normally the players that come back don't play league matches, but they train, are part of the team, so I think we need to eliminate this and give them 3 days for them to do what they want, then they come back.
Now, the concept of resting players is not new, but I find it interesting that Ancelotti, he talked not just about the physical side and avoiding injury, but also about reducing the mental load on his players. And I can see this going wrong. I can see a player being given a break, coming back, having a bad first game back, and kind of drawing the ire of fans. But it's an interesting concept. We'll see if Real Madrid does, in fact, follow through.
Let's end on baseball. There's a lot going on at the Little League World Series, which is this weekend.
Yeah, including some Major League Baseball. The Tigers taking on the Yankees last night in the Little League Classic. A handful of Little Leaguers got to ride the bus with the Yankees on their way into the stadium. New York ended up losing, but it didn't dim the experience for right fielder Aaron Judge.
I got to ride a bus with some of the kids, and they're just asking questions about what do you do? They're pointing at your muscles, like how do I get big and strong? It's some pretty cool stuff, some memories I won't forget. They're making you feel like the Beatles out there. But it was fun, there's a lot of baseball fans. This is where a lot of dreams start for some young kids that are hopefully be sitting here at some point. So just getting a chance to share that moment with them, talk with them, sign a couple autographs. You'd ask both teams. I think we all enjoyed that experience.
I like picturing the nervous sweat of a major leaguer 25 years ago being asked, how do I get my muscles that big? Not as much an issue now. Elsewhere at the Little League World Series, Canada did save their tournament with a win on Saturday, but they lost to Mexico yesterday, so their tournament is done.
Very funny. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Paul McGowan, who's in for sports this morning on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Stay with us. We're going to talk about why kids don't seem to play outside and as freely in the summertime as in past generations. Our urban affairs columnist has a column about that up on our website this morning. You can check out. But Ben Farr is going to join us in studio right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. It's 7:30, mostly cloudy and 17, mainly cloudy today. Chance of showers or a thunderstorm, a high of 27. People from Bonabonabee Cree Nation say they want to head home. Hundreds from the community were displaced last week because of an out-of-control wildfire. Many are staying in hotels in Winnipeg and Brandon, but others are in emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg. Donald Wienusk says people staying at that emergency shelter need better accommodations.
People are very tired and we can't sleep at night and you're worried about your community back home. Hopefully that fire won't get there.
The province said as of Friday, the fire had consumed more than 10,000 hectares of land. A sign outside the emergency centre by the Red Cross said a bus was taking 60 people to a hotel in Portage la Prairie yesterday. Another sign said it had a 10 p.m. curfew and also came into effect as of last night. No one was allowed in after that time. People in McCreary area are shaken after 4 people were found dead on Friday. RCMP are investigating a triple homicide. Police say the 4th person died of self-inflicted injury. RCMP are expected to release more about the investigation today, but they say there is no risk to the public. Robert Brunel is the mayor of the neighboring community of St. Rose. He says it has rattled everyone in the region.
It's a very rare occurrence to have such a tragedy happen, and it definitely sends shockwaves throughout the community and the area because we are all interconnected.
McCreary is 250 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. A Northern Manitoba First Nation is trying to get creative to address housing issues in the community. Nisitchewaisak Cree Nation is raffling off a modular home. Deputy Chief Marcel Moody says the community bought it for $200,000. He acknowledges the raffle isn't sitting well with those who think the $150 price tag for the ticket is out of reach for some band members. Moody doesn't think the cost is too much and says the community is doing more to tackle its housing shortage.
I think we need about 400 to 500 more homes in our community. We built a new subdivision that we completed last year. It's ready to occupy close to 100 homes. The lots are there, they're surveyed and everything, but we just need the homes to put into these lots.
Moody says the draw is only open to NCN members and the home must remain in the community. He says money brought in from the ticket sales will go towards covering the cost of the home. With only weeks to go before the start of the school year, the Mystery Lake School Division is scrambling to find places for students after a fire destroyed a school last month. The City of Thompson says the fire at the Westwood Elementary School started in an electrical panel. Zoe Betres taught grade 4 there for 16 years and is devastated by the fire. She is still processing the loss of her classroom and the precious items from students that adorned the walls.
It's just like the pictures they draw that are up on the bulletin board, or little gifts that they made at home, just those kind of things that don't cost lots but are priceless because the kids made them themselves.
Betas organized a book drive to help her colleagues rebuild their classrooms. 2 different elementary schools will accommodate the displaced students and staff in the fall. In international news, thousands of protesters are gathering in Chicago this morning with the mass demonstrations expected outside of the Democratic National Convention. Many are angry with the Biden administration for its handling of the Israel-Hamas war. As we hear from the CBC's Katie Simpson, organizers are hoping their message overshadows the official agenda.
We have here in Chicago one of the largest Palestinian communities in the country.
And in support of the Palestinian community, thousands of demonstrators are expected to march today around the secure perimeter of the Democratic National Convention. Organizer and Chicago City Councilor Byron Sigcho Lopez says now is the moment to try to convince Vice President Kamala Harris to embrace a new position. They want an end to U.S. support for Israel in the war in Gaza.
Democratic leadership must understand that the coalition that elected President Biden, including immigrant communities, we must make sure that the platform incorporates a change in foreign policy.
Lopez does not want Donald Trump reelected, but he does not think any party should expect his vote and will continue to push Democrats for change. Protests are expected all week, but the gathering happening today could be the largest. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Chicago.
And the union that represents railroad workers at Canadian Pacific, Kansas City, says it has served a 72-hour strike notice. Both Canadian National and CPKC have warned that 9,300 unionized workers will be locked out on Thursday if no agreement is reached in contract talks. Canada's main freight railways have been drastically reduced in the amount of goods that they're shipping because of the possible lockout. The looming stoppage threatens to disrupt many industries' supply chains. And that's the news from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So, Megan, earlier this morning we were talking about regional things that we learn when we're vacationing in Canada and the differences between provinces.
Yes.
So I don't know if you heard me talking about being in Newfoundland and how they put dressing on my fries.
Oh, no, I didn't.
So it was like a kind of like a stuffing, savory thing, and they put it on your fries.
Interesting.
And I'm like, oh, cool. So I thought of you with the whole bunny hug thing out of your Sask roots.
It's true. It's true.
So
yeah.
It's the best name for a hoodie ever. Oh, the stuffing?
Yeah. Okay.
My Manitoba palate would need to adjust to it. How's that for an answer?
You know what I found on fries is a visit to England? Curry gravy. Oh.
Curry gravy?
Oh, it is so good.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Hard to find here, but oh my goodness, it's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you been vacationing anywhere where you had a regional, ate something and you went, ooh, I'm going to keep eating this, or maybe I'm glad I learned about it, but I'm not going to keep eating this. But have you been anywhere this summer? You can always call us, let us know. Right now, if you're going to be out and about today, let's find out what the weather's going to be like. It's time for your regional forecast from CBC Manitoba, and Chloe Friesen's in with our details.
Hello. Currently 17 degrees at the Forks here in Winnipeg. Today, looking at mainly cloudy skies with a 30% chance of showers this morning with the risk of a thunderstorm. That should clear up by the afternoon. We will see hazy skies, high of 27, but the humidex is making things feel more like 32. That's our forecasted high. Tomorrow, here in Winnipeg, a mix of sun and clouds, hazy. Those skies continue. Wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. Tomorrow, a high of 29, with that humidex feeling more like 35. And for Wednesday, sunny skies and a high of 27. And that humidex is going to be felt kind of across the province. Very humid out there today in Brandon. For you folks, currently it's around, I think, 14 degrees in Brandon. Yep, partly cloudy, 14 at the airport in Brandon. Sunny skies, hazy, high of 30 with the humidex feeling more like 37 today for you folks in Brandon. Tomorrow, increasing cloudiness early in the morning. Hazy skies, wind becoming south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. A high of 29, feeling like 37 once again tomorrow in Brandon. For you folks in Dauphin, currently it is 17 degrees, mostly cloudy. Looking at a mix of sun and cloud today with a 60% chance of showers early this morning with a risk of a thunderstorm. That should clear up by this afternoon. Hazy skies, a high of 28. Feeling more like 36 with that humidex. Tomorrow in Dauphin, a mix of sun and cloud, becoming cloudy in the afternoon, hazy skies, and a high of 29, feeling more like 36. In Thompson, mostly cloudy, 11 degrees, looking at sunny skies, some of that haze still in the air, a high of 24, with the humidex feeling more like 27. Tomorrow in Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, hazy skies, high of 28, feeling like 34. So the story when it comes to weather is it's going to feel warmer than what the what the temperature is. It's going to probably feel sticky as well. So just prepare yourself for, if you have hair that likes to interact with humidity, don't care too much about it today. I would say don't spend too much
Just
time.
let it go.
Just let it go. Just enjoy whatever it does. And enjoy the commute, because there's really not anything going on. It's a Monday in the last few weeks of August here. So if there does happen to be something that is slowing you down or getting in your way, you can call us and let us know on the commuter line at 204-788-3093.
All right, Chloe Friesen, thank you. Well, next on the show, where are all the kids? And why aren't they playing outside like they used to? Now, that is a question that Ben Farr, CBC Manitoba's urban living contributor, dove into for his latest column. In the second edition of My Hometown, Ben did a deep dive into the research to find out why fewer kids are getting fresh air play compared to previous generations. And surprise, it is not just about screen time, because I know that's what most of us think. So Ben is in studio to walk through what he found. Hi there.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's start with some numbers that you found. How much time actually does the average Canadian kid spend playing outside every day?
So looking into the data, Participation recommends that kids are getting 2 hours of playtime every day. But when we actually look at what's really happening, they're only getting outside for around 45 minutes every day on average.
Okay. And this is when you say kids, you said 5 to 17 is the age group for that data.
Exactly,
So about
yes.
45 minutes are supposed to be getting 2 hours. How does it differ from previous generations then of kids? Like what did play look like when, I don't know how old you are, but when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, I would get outside as early as possible and stay out as late as possible till the streetlights came on. But looking into the data again, going back to an occupational therapist who we were studying throughout this column, she did research on this in the States, looking into parents who are concerned about how much their kids are getting outside. And she found that a lot of these parents who are concerned were getting 6 to 8 hours of playtime in previous generations. And I know from my own experience, that's definitely what I found to be true.
Got it. And so previous generations being, I guess, and I'm Gen X, so that's obvious. I'm obviously we were outside all the time. There were no screens. But do we know when it stopped? I guess we don't really know when that would have stopped.
It seems to have come down a little bit throughout my generation, being on the cusp of millennial Gen Z,
Got it.
especially with the rise of screens. That wasn't not necessarily the biggest factor, but that is kind of in line over the last 20 or so years. We've seen that drop for sure.
So we know screen time is a factor for modern day kids. Obviously, it's part of this. But remind us how many hours a day then the average kid spends in front of a screen right now.
It's definitely going up over the last decade through the pandemic, especially. Younger kids aged 8 to 12, they're spending between 5 to 6 hours on screens. And for those teens, 13 to 17, it's a lot more, over 8 hours every day.
8 hours. How have the devices changed how today's kids organize their play times or even, plan to hang out with friends?
The biggest difference is, I mean, again, going back to my own childhood, it was easy to go knock on a friend's door and get them to come outside. But with social media, with screens, there's a lot less unstructured play, which is the big factor that gets kids outside more.
You looked at crime stats and the perception of safety and how that also affected play. What did you find there?
Found that mainly, starting off with the poll that we found from Probe Research of Manitoba adults, that found that everyone feels like they're getting that our community is a little bit less safe now than it used to be. But zooming out, the data doesn't necessarily back that up. Stats Canada found that since the 90s across Canada, crime's been on the decline. And for kids specifically, there's a less than 1% chance of them becoming the victims of violent crime.
What other outside deterrents are there to play that you discovered when you were looking at this?
There's a few. Bullying, traffic, and injuries are some of the biggest ones.
So that's parental worries, I guess, then about those things. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, though, looking specifically at injuries, WRHA says that there's 30,000 ER visits by kids every year across Canada. But looking at the vast majority of those injuries, they're not overnight stays. They're minor scrapes, minor cuts that heal really quickly. And the other concerns, they can be managed with adult support as well.
Without outdoor play, parents might be concerned about things that they can't control and risks, or with outdoor play, rather, they might be worried about all of that. You found that risk taking is actually good for kids. I watched your article online, actually. So explain this to the radio audience. How is risk good?
Well, what we found is that risk for kids helps them to become more independent, more responsible when they eventually become adults. But the difference is that risk versus exposing them to risks versus hazards is very different. Hazards are outside of their control. Things like traffic or broken playground equipment, they're not necessarily things that kids can foresee and manage. Whereas there's risks like playing at speed or playing at height, which are things that kids can definitely manage and that they can explore their limits through.
And they should, right? In your article online, one of the things that stood out to me was, how do you learn what your limits are, what safe play is if you're never exposed to anything?
Exactly.
Right?
Those risks are important so that they do learn those limits. And again, it makes them more comfortable with understanding their limits and their capabilities as they get older too.
So can playgrounds and how they're designed play a role in that as well? Like to encourage kids to get outside more and be more excited about the outdoors and maybe take some safe risks? That sounds like an oxymoron, but it's kind of what we're talking about.
It definitely does. And there definitely is ways. Specifically here in Winnipeg, we saw that Lord Selkirk School added more risky playground equipment, things like rocks. And in other schools, like there was a playground in Burnaby, daycare center in Edmonton, they added taller playground equipment. And the kids loved it. They were engaging with the playground equipment. They were climbing at heights, and they were learning those limits, again, with the adult supervision, adult instruction to help them understand where their limits are, not just playing totally alone, but they loved the new playground equipment, and they spent a lot more time on it.
Before you go this morning, do you have advice for kids and parents just based on what you've been researching this and looking at it? What would you want to leave people with?
I'd say it's definitely tough to just ignore the risks and ignore the hazards. I mean, these concerns come out of love, right? It's concern for the kids. So the biggest difference I would say that can help kids get out more is understanding how to manage hazards and how to guide kids through those risks. The hazards are things that definitely need to be controlled, like getting kids helmets for their bikes or teaching them how to cross the street safely. But when they're playing at height, encourage them to learn where their limits are and encourage them to understand the dangers instead of pushing them away from the potentially risky playground equipment.
Thanks for coming in this morning. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
You should check out Ben's column online and video as well, explaining even more of the data than we got through this morning. Ben Forrest, CBC Manitoba's new urban living commentator. So his column, My Hometown, explores life in Winnipeg, how we live, what works, what doesn't, and how we can make the city better. So today it's all about play. So check it out. cbc.ca/Manitoba. And in a moment, we are going to read some of these comments that are coming in already. We asked you about play in your life and how you manage risk.
Angeline Tadaweo hosts The Block.
Afrobeats to jazz, hip-hop to R&B, calypso, Kez the Dan, Michelle Montano, Bob Marley, Bounty Killer. So we really give all these artists a chance to shine, and the key is in the programming, in making it make sense, and making sure that the music is fluid, a fluid experience.
The Block with Angeline Tadaweo. Available now on CBC Listen.
7:46 a.m. And so we did ask you this morning, as Ben's article looked at how kids are not playing outside like they did in previous generations and why, we asked you what your sense of it is in your own life. So I want to share some of the comments that are coming in on my Facebook page this morning, which during the show acts as a show page. Becky Lett says the pandemic forced kids to mostly connect inside, and you combine that with helicopter parenting and screens, and then that just keeps them inside. Ian McLaughlin wrote in, the car dependency eroded all third places. And then the 24-hour news cycle created fear when crime rates actually went down, which is something that Ben highlighted. Tanya J. Smith said no real safe spaces for them to go without a caregiver or a parent. Or without a caregiver present is what Tanya has written here, which is interesting because I'm also wondering, how you handle this, what your sense of this is with play in your own kids in your own life, but also where are those spaces that you do feel comfortable for the kids to kind of just go outside and play. So love to hear from you. A couple more comments here that are already coming in on the conversation. So Alicia Modzelska-Balesius wrote in, technology and helicopter parenting killed going outside to play. And finally, Carlene Sheard wrote in, fear created by social media and by the media. There's a park a block away, she writes, and when my daughter was 7, she asked if she could go swing. I said, sure, just come back in an hour. 20 minutes later, she was back home with a quote-unquote mom at her side who said, did you realize she left your house? I said, yeah, but I have to have a talk with her now about not leaving anywhere without our safe word. So she says, I grew up in the 80s. We were terrified at moments. And she alludes to some abductions and things that had happened in the 80s. And I was a child of that generation. I remember those fears. But she says, we still went outside. And finally, Tracy Lynn said, my kids do play outside almost all day long. But I think the difference is I will be out there playing with them or sitting outside enjoying the sunshine. So how do you handle play in your family? And how do you encourage the kids to play more freely outside? And do you feel safe doing that? Why or why not? What do you need out of the city to make that more happen more regularly in your life? And what's your experience been? If you're just getting up this morning and tuning into the radio, you can check out Ben Farr's column. It explores this online at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Ben was just on the air with us here. And you can weigh in by writing like those folks did to our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is actually my personal page, Marcy Marcusa, but during the show, I like to post questions there and get into comments. You can also pick up the phone, and that number is 788-3205. Well, the time right now is 10 to 8 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. And coming up on the program here after 8 o'clock, why a plan to better connect Winnipeg and several surrounding municipalities is stoking fears of lost freedom for some people. So we're going to hear more about that coming up after 8 o'clock right here on the show. Winds are calm right now. It is partly cloudy in the city of Winnipeg. It's 17 degrees. Our high this Monday is 27 with humidex. It's going to feel more like 32. Well, next on the show, the wildfire is still raging near Bunnabonaby Cree Nation. The community is 576 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg, of course. And according to the Bunnabonaby Cree Nation chief, who is Richard Hart, many residents were forced to evacuate on C-100 Hercules planes, and that happened last Friday. We've been reporting this, of course, throughout. Hart says 150 residents found emergency shelter now just next door to us at the CBC here at the University of Winnipeg. CBC's Gavin Axelrod spoke to Bunnabonaby residents Donald and Laura Wienusk about their experience at the university so far.
Well, it's been tiring. People are very tired and you can't sleep at night and you're worried about your community back home. Hopefully that fire won't get there. They were using a Hercules plane. The RCMP were knocking on the door. The others that were going to stay behind, but the RCMP went knocking on the door and they told them that they had to leave, so they did leave.
You want to stay behind?
No.
So what day did you get to Winnipeg?
Friday. We got here on Friday.
So have you been staying at the university?
Yeah, we've been.
So what's it been like?
We sleeping there and kids, babies, children. Yeah, it is noisy.
Have they told you to be able to get a hotel room or anything?
They haven't given us an update yet, but they told us that they're working on accommodations for everybody. We can't sleep at night. It's been too loud in there. It's side by side.
That's CBC's Gavin Axelrod in conversation with Donald and Laura Wienusk. They're two of the evacuees from Bunnabonaby Cree Nation staying at the University of Winnipeg right now. So Gavin also had a chance to speak to the chief, Richard Hart, and he has remained in community.
We had a lot of smoke this morning come into the community. As the days progress, the winds have changed a bit, and there's hardly any smoke at this time. I don't think the fire has progressed any closer, and I think that the firefighters have been doing a very good job working to contain the fire, and the weather basically has been cooperating and helping us fight the fire. So.
Do you have a sense of when maybe people might be able to go back?
It's hard to say. I mean, we're hoping that the firefighters can contain the fire, in the next 2 or 3 days, and after that, I'm not quite sure what the time frame for clearance to return would take, and so we don't have a definite answer to the question of when people can return. Yeah. Because currently, the fire still poses a danger to the community and to people if winds change and high amounts of smoke come into the community. It's always a dangerous situation.
How many people would you say have been evacuated so far?
It's I think our numbers are just under 2,500 people have been evacuated into Winnipeg and Brandon.
We were speaking to some members of the communities at the University of Winnipeg where the emergency shelter is set up, and some people are saying, they're having a bit of a hard time because there's so many people in that shelter. What would you say, I guess, to folks who are having a difficult time right now in kind of that environment?
We try and tell our people to be patient and that the Red Cross is trying to find rooms, and hopefully they'll get out of the shelter soon. But to be very straightforward on this, that's been my biggest stressor, has been taking calls every 2 to 5 minutes from very frustrated people with their families that have been at the shelter now for the third day, and they feel I can sense their frustration, and they're stressed out and they're tired, and they really need a hotel room to relax a bit, I guess, or get some rest. They're not getting rest at the shelter, and I think that's the biggest priority, is to ramp up the efforts to get rooms for these people and get them out of the shelter as soon as today, it's getting too much for them, and I sense their frustration. And when I talk to them, there are hotel rooms out there that are available, but for whatever reason, the process is so slow. People are not getting moved out quickly enough from that shelter.
So that was a CBC's Gavin Axelrod speaking to Bunabonabee Cree Nation Chief Richard Hart, who, as I mentioned, remains in community this morning. The community is about 576 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg, and residents, 150 of them, are in an emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg. Many were forced to evacuate on Hercules Plains last Friday as that fire continues to approach Bunabonabee. Now, CBC did reach out to the Canadian Red Cross for a statement that built on what you heard there from the chief about some of the concerns they have. And they responded to CBC saying, quote, "The Canadian Red Cross continues to support community members of Bunabonabee Cree Nation who've been impacted by wildfires. We currently do not have official numbers of how many community members are being supported or specific information about where evacuees will be located. At the request of the City of Winnipeg, through a standing agreement with Indigenous Services Canada, an emergency shelter has opened, as we've told you, at the University of Winnipeg campus to provide emergency accommodation to community members evacuated due to wildfires." And the statement goes on to say this helps ensure that accommodation is available to community members who are under evacuation due to wildfires, end quote. But of course, this is of concern anytime we see people evacuated from community and in Winnipeg. You might be thinking about flood evacuees, many of them coming to Winnipeg over many years, like St. Martin. I mean, people were here from there and from Peguis, people displaced due to various issues that happen up north, whether it's floods or in this case fires, and sometimes for years. So the issue of response in the state of the emergency, and then also what does long-term mean for shelter of evacuees as well, have been long-standing concerns in this province. So we will update today through the news what is going on with Bunabonabee Cree Nation, not just with the fire, but also with the services and supports that will be there for people. It is now 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and filling in for Heather Wells this morning is Megan Ketchison, and she's here with headlines now. Hi there.
Hi. Well, RCMP say they will be talking to investigators today about a triple homicide in McCreary. 4 people were found dead Friday, 3 homicides and 1 self-inflicted death. Police say there is no risk to the public, but people in McCreary and neighboring communities are still shaken. And with only weeks to go before the start of the school year, the Mystery Lake School Division is scrambling to find places for students after a fire destroyed a school in the city last month. And we'll have more coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
We're actually going to have more out of McCreary as well on the program after 8 o'clock. We're going to hear from the Reeve of the community, so stay tuned for that. Also after 8 here on Information Radio, for some Manitobans, a plan meant to help Winnipeg and several surrounding municipalities collaborate on things like land use. For some people, though, it's raising concerns that it could lead to a loss of freedom. So we're going to hear more about some of those fears that some people have and get some analysis of them. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up after 8 o'clock on the show. Right now it is 17 degrees in Winnipeg, and we've got some nice sunshine downtown. For the day, though, we are actually expecting it to be mainly cloudy. And a 30% chance of showers moving in later this morning with a risk of a thunderstorm. So we'll see what happens and how quickly it clears, because it is going to clear out and then be hazy with a high today in Winnipeg of 27, with humidex going to feel more like 32. On the morning commute this morning, should be just fine for you out there. We haven't had a busy commuter line. We can tell you, though, the Shaftesbury is closed. Just a reminder, that is for the week for railway repairs. That's between Wilkes and West Taylor. So Shaftesbury between Wilkes and West Taylor. Call us if you have a problem. 788-3093 is where you can reach us. We'll stay right here. It's 1 minute to 8 o'clock. A lot of analysis of what is happening today in national news and international news. The Democratic National Convention begins today, and that is coming up. It's been leading World Report. Stay with us.
Today on Q.
I can't tell if you're genuine or I'm going to wake up one day inside a true crime podcast.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. Nava Mao is up for an Emmy for her work on the hit series Baby Reindeer, making her one of the very few trans actors who've received that acknowledgement. She'll tell you why representation on big and small screens matters.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. and on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. The Democrats have been riding a wave of momentum since Kamala Harris became their nominee. But now that they're kicking off their national convention, their focus is on how to make sure that energy wins them battleground states. That's On the Current with guest host Connie Walker in half an hour.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will take center stage as the Democratic National Convention begins today. Delegates from across the country are gathering in Chicago. So are protesters who want to call out the Biden administration for its response to the Israel-Hamas war. The CBC's Ithel Musa joins me now from Chicago. And Ithel, there will be a lot happening outside this convention. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the big protest in Chicago will be happening this afternoon. It's led by a coalition of more than 200 organizations calling for an end to U.S. military support of Israel. Outside the arena, demonstrators are demanding an arms embargo against Israel. But there will also be delegates inside the arena advocating an anti-war agenda. About 30 uncommitted delegates representing the Democratic primary voters who opposed President Biden over his stance on Israel will be at the convention. Some are saying they will not endorse Harris without a guarantee her administration will take action on this issue. According to the uncommitted national movement, for the first time in history, the DNC will hold a panel on Palestinian human rights this afternoon. Palestinian Americans will be speaking there, and they will be pushing for policy change, specifically a ceasefire and an end to U.S. military support.
There's also a lot on the actual agenda for the Democrats. What are we expecting on day one?
Well, this convention really is about presenting Harris and Walz's vision for America and contrasting them with Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Today's theme at the convention is for the people. So it's expected we'll hear more about the social policies this ticket believes will help support everyday Americans. U.S. President Joe Biden will be making tonight's keynote address, and he'll likely receive a very warm welcome. Biden will be making the case for Harris and Walz tonight. His speech will also be a farewell to Democrats and a symbolic handoff to a new leader.
Thank you, Ithel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ithel Musa in Chicago. So far, the U.S. government is showing no signs of changing its stance on the Middle East. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv this morning, still trying to get a ceasefire deal done.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security.
Blinken says he is part of an intensive diplomatic effort to get an agreement over the line. The talks have been going on for months, and this week, mediators will continue their negotiations in Cairo. A search and rescue operation is happening right now off the coast of Sicily. Officials say one Canadian is dead. At least 6 others are missing. Their luxury yacht capsized and sank this morning. Megan Williams is tracking developments.
The 50-meter-long luxury sailing yacht was hit by a severe storm early this morning. Eyewitnesses describe a water spout, which is a kind of mini tornado, hitting the vessel, causing it to sink about half a kilometer off the coast of the Sicilian port town of Porticello. 22 people were on board from various European nations, as well as the U.S. and Canada. The Italian Coast Guard says it has recovered the body of a Canadian-born man who lives in Antigua and was the ship's cook. They also say most of the people who are still missing are British citizens.
It's a strong orkan gust, very strong.
A local fisher who was just about to leave port early this morning said the powerful storm lasted about 12 minutes. After it blew through, he says a flare was released and he and fellow fishers went towards it, where they found only debris, some cushions and tables floating. They called rescuers. Among those rescued is a 1-year-old child. The yacht has been located at the bottom of the sea. Divers continue to search for the missing people, who they say may be trapped inside the yacht. Megan Williams, CBC News, Florence.
China and the Philippines are accusing each other of causing a collision at sea. It happened in the disputed South China Sea. China's Coast Guard says Philippine vessels ignored repeated warnings and deliberately rammed into one of their vessels, something officials in the Philippines are denying. Jonathan Malaya is with the Philippine South China Sea Task Force.
This morning, Philippine Coast Guard vessels encountered unlawful and aggressive maneuvers from Chinese Coast Guard vessels while en route to Patag and Lawak Islands in the West Philippine Sea. These dangerous maneuvers resulted in collision, causing structural damage to both Coast Guard vessels.
The U.S. ambassador to Manila says the U.S. stands with the Philippines and condemns what she calls dangerous maneuvers by China's Coast Guard. More than 9,000 workers at Canada's two major railways could be either on strike or locked out as of Thursday. The union representing workers at Canadian Pacific Kansas City Limited says it has served the railway a 72-hour strike notice. Unless a deal is made, it says workers will walk off the job just after midnight Thursday. CN Rail said if there is no agreement, it intends to lock workers out at the same time. The company says no significant progress was made during weekend negotiations. A strike could disrupt supply chains across many industries. In northern Ontario, a coroner's inquest has released a call to action. It outlines 42 recommendations to improve healthcare services in remote communities. The jury was looking into the death of a woman from Kingfisher Lake First Nation. Her family lobbied for an inquest into the healthcare services she received. The CBC's Sarah Law reports.
Ruth Ann Queequish died of untreated, undiagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. She was 31 years old. Ontario Member of Parliament Saul Mamakwa is from Kingfisher Lake. He says her death speaks to the need for a better healthcare system that is run by First Nations themselves.
Give us those provincial resources, give us those federal resources, and let us run it on our own.
Kingfisher Lake is part of Anishinaabe-Aski Nation. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says the healthcare system is built, in his words, on colonial policies.
That speaks to just how racist this healthcare system that we're still subject to is. To me, that is the bottom line in terms of why Ruth Ann died and why so many of our people are still very much at risk.
The inquest jury recommended a number of improvements: more healthcare workers, better access to medical records, and support for patient advocacy. There are also plans for a new nursing station in Kingfisher Lake. Carolyn Leach served as inquest counsel. She says the process has been bittersweet. On the one hand,
the suffering of a family is required to bring public attention to an issue like this.
On the other hand, she's inspired by the family's optimism that positive change will come. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
The winds are shifting in Ontario. The province has announced plans to get back into the business of wind power. There have been no new wind farms built since Doug Ford's PC government took office 6 years ago. The CBC's Mike Crawley has the latest.
Melanchthon Township is an hour-and-a-half drive northwest of Toronto. It's home to around 3,000 people and more than 160 wind turbines.
We're not unhappy with the way wind turbines have rolled out in Melanchthon.
Darren White is the mayor.
The key, I would say, is that there has to be and continue to be benefit for the municipalities that are hosting them.
When Ontario's then Liberal government began its green energy push about 15 years ago, wind farms were built in communities whether locals wanted them or not. When Doug Ford became premier in 2018, he cancelled hundreds of wind and solar projects. That's why his government's newfound enthusiasm for green energy is raising eyebrows.
Yes, it was a surprise.
Jane Wilson is the volunteer president of Wind Concerns Ontario, an advocacy group.
So we'd like to see more of the existing problems addressed and resolved before we go forward and contract with more wind power sites.
Ontario plans to procure 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy over the coming decade. That's more than double what it will get from refurbishing one of the province's nuclear plants. CBC News requested an interview with Ontario's energy minister, but he was not available. Government officials say the province won't force new wind farms anywhere without local council consent, and they say producing affordable electricity is a priority. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Melanchthon Township, Ontario.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
We got a hot, sticky day on our hands here in Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us this morning on CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Chloe's in a moment with our forecast, but you're going to need a lot of water, a hat, and some shades today. Well, this half hour on the program, we're going to be having a conversation about something that's been happening at a number of different meetings in rural municipalities. That is because for some Manitobans, a plan that's meant to help Winnipeg and several surrounding municipalities collaborate on things like land use is raising concerns that it could lead to a loss of freedom. So what's been happening in these meetings is people are packing them, but are they really aware of what those plans are about? Or are they being affected by conspiracy theories? We're going to talk about that this half hour. Stay tuned. So we'll walk you through some of those details. I also want to mention that this half hour, the people of McCreary, of course, and nearby communities remain in disbelief after that triple homicide there. We're going to hear from the Reeve of the community this half hour, so stay tuned for that. Right now, let's go to Megan Ketchison, who's in with more news and headlines. Hi, Megan.
Hi there. Well, some evacuees from Bunabonabee Cree Nation say they're in need of better accommodations. An out-of-control wildfire forced thousands out of their community last week. Many are staying at an emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg Recplex, but they say it's been hard to get rest or privacy there. And a raffle for a new home in Nishishiwaysak Cree Nation isn't sitting well with everyone. It bought a modular home for $200,000, and people who pay $150 for a ticket have a chance to win it. The chief admits there has been criticism over the cost of the ticket, which some feel is out of reach to some people in need of housing. And I'll have more coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Let's get into the weather in the morning commute with Chloe Friesen.
Good morning. Currently 19 degrees in Winnipeg here at the not here at the Forks. We're not at the Forks. We're downtown, but at the Forks.
Same temperature as here.
19 degrees. Today we're looking at mainly cloudy skies. 30% chance of showers this morning with a risk of a thunderstorm. Clearing this afternoon. Hazy skies and a high of 27. With a humidex, it's going to feel more like 32. Marcy was alluding to maybe needing a hat and some water. Maybe a change of clothes. It's going to be sticky out there today. Right now in Brandon, we are looking at partly cloudy skies. 16 degrees. Churchill, misty, 8 degrees. In Dauphin at your airport, mostly cloudy, 18. And in Portage, mostly cloudy, 17 degrees. Thompson, mostly cloudy, and 12. And again, here in Winnipeg at the Forks, it is 19. That's actually our province's hotspot at the moment. Not a lot going on when it comes to the commute. It's not too busy of a morning here. Just a reminder, though, that if you are traveling on Shaftesbury, it's closed between Wilkes and West Taylor until the end of the day Saturday, August 24th, and that's to accommodate some rail work in the area. So if you travel on Shaftesbury between Wilkes and West Taylor, you will have to find an alternate route this week. And of course, if there is something that pops up and is getting in your way, I would love to hear about it. You can call us at 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, proponents of the plan say it would help Winnipeg and 17 surrounding municipalities collaborate on everything from expanding wastewater treatment to developing more roads. But for some Manitobans, all Plan 2050 does is raise concerns. And people are so concerned that they showed up in droves to a public hearing about this plan in Niverville earlier this month. In fact, so many people turned up to that hearing, 600 people, it ended up being postponed. So what is it about Plan 2050? If you've been following this in the news, what is it about this plan that is striking fear in so many Manitobans? As leaders from Selkirk, Niverville, Headingley, St. Andrews, and East St. Paul describe this as, quote, forced involvement. St. Andrews Chief Administrative Officer Brent Olinik told CBC the fear is rooted in conspiracy.
some of the feedback that's coming from residents in that is, quite frankly, right out there, right? Now it's becoming an issue of how do we get our message across what's really happening versus the message that's being created by special interest groups that, have taken what's happening and turned it into some conspiracy theories, right? I've heard everything from this will expedite toll roads coming up to you won't be able to leave your home. How do you bring the knowledge to the people and educate the people on what's really happening here? So I believe there's a gap there.
Cecil Rosner is my next guest, managing editor at the Investigative Journalism Foundation and author of Manipulating the Message, How Powerful Forces Shape the News. He's also former managing editor here at CBC Manitoba. Good morning.
Hi, Marcy.
So what do you make of this reaction we're seeing from some Manitobans to the 2050 plan? What surprises you about people packing the house and, some of the meetings are being shut down? There's too many people.
I think the first thing we should talk about is that there's a trend. There's a trend that trust in government and institutions, in media, is low, and people are angry out there. And for a lot of legitimate reasons, there's a lot of anger out there. And so this tends to color a lot of the debate. It tends to produce a lot of overheated rhetoric around public policy issues. But I think the critical thing is people have to be cautious that, I'm a lifelong journalist. I tell reporters, be skeptical. Don't accept everything you hear. But at the same time, you have to be cautious about falling down the rabbit hole of conspiracy or being pulled down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. Because I find that anytime I start digging into those theories, you find that they profit certain sectors. There's some people who want to create chaos. They want to bring down governments. They want to advance their own specific interests. And I think a lot of those factors are at play in this thing we're seeing playing out around us in Manitoba.
Anytime a conspiracy takes off, as you all know, and then, forces come in even to co-opt people to get deeper into something. And what's really at risk, too, is you miss out on some legitimate concerns that maybe are out there. So I just want to look at the fact that some of the leaders say that this plan are going to increase the complexity of their governments to do their own planning and make land use decisions. So I guess my question is, how do you address the conspiracy theories or get around that somehow without dismissing what might be some very valid concerns? Because those two things get mixed together, and then all of a sudden we're not really talking about Plan 2050 and how it could affect people's lives.
Totally. There are absolutely legitimate concerns. They have been voiced by some of the mayors and reeves at issue. But I think we need rational debate. We need rational debate and consultations. And then I think people have to do their own research. They have to look at the evidence. Don't just look at the latest social media post and immediately start sharing that with all your friends and family without having dug into what is really going on. Because if you look at some of those social media posts, and I have, here's one, word for word, be ready to have your car taken away. Written, by the way, by someone who once put their name forward to be Premier of Manitoba.
That frightens me. Okay.
Or so much for democracy. So I think it's that kind of rhetoric that does not help even the people who want to raise some very legitimate concerns.
So here's the $1 million question, and I don't even know that you'll have an answer to this, Cecil, but somebody reads, get ready to have your car taken away. They go to the meeting. They're a citizen, and they say, I read my car is going to be taken away. The counselor or leader says, that's not in this plan. That has nothing to do with this. You let your fears be put to rest. But then they still aren't, because someone beside them says, don't believe them or read my research or my version of this. Is there a way that you would suggest people sort of do their own research, as you said?
This is true, I think, for everything, not just on this issue, but just about anything you read in the news or you read on social media. The first thing, and this is good advice both for journalists and members of the public, what are the sources of information? Are they legitimate? Where is the evidence for assertions being made? Don't believe everything you read, no matter what the source is. So do be skeptical. Don't be cynical of everything that comes your way. And also go to multiple sources. Read widely. And then if you read widely about this very issue, you'll see that Winnipeg and Manitoba is not the first place this overheated rhetoric has started in. There have been demonstrations and all kinds of manifestations of this in other places, and reading about those is actually instructive to figure out what's going on here right now.
Because some of what this has been co-opted by, and we mentioned it earlier, is this idea around the conspiracy of the 15-minute city model, despite the fact that this plan is not a version of that model. And we saw that in Brandon. If you're listening, you might have been in Brandon. They had to shut down a meeting there. Some social media sites like X, formerly known as Twitter, now have community notes that essentially act as fact checks people can add. How helpful is that with dispelling information? Because somebody actually sees someone might be on there and thinking, well, this community note is it's updating the fact.
Yeah, I think you also have to be skeptical and cautious about that. We all know who is the leader of X these days, Elon Musk, and he himself has been pushing and promulgating various theories which don't stand up to scrutiny and evidence. So again, if you demand evidence of things, I think you all remember during the Olympics there was a big controversy and a lot of overheated rhetoric about a boxer from Algeria who won a match, and there was a whole bunch of unsubstantiated rumors, a lot of which got promulgated on X, by the way. And again, if people dug into the facts instead of just looking at the last post that they had seen and gotten all worked up about it, we would have had a much better conversation.
What if you're speaking, if someone's listening, Cecil, and you're talking to someone who really believes a conspiracy, and you've done your research and you've looked into this and you understand that it is a conspiracy? How do you help them without shaming them? Because the last thing you want to do is say your concerns are not valid. They may not be factual. They may not be valid in the context of what we're talking about, but you don't want them to move away from the conversation and maybe go deeper into the whole of conspiracy.
Yeah, I teach a course at the University of Manitoba and the University of Winnipeg that deals with misinformation and disinformation. It's useful actually to figure out what is the difference between those two things. Misinformation can be otherwise honest, well-intentioned people sharing things without having full knowledge that spreads wrong information, whereas disinformation has the deliberate intent to mislead. And sometimes I will see a post on Facebook or social media from one of my family members and friends in which they're clearly wrong. They're not evil disinformation purveyors. They're just been swept up in unknowingly spreading misinformation, and better education and a devotion to doing more of your own research, I think, is the best way to try to address those things.
How hopeful are you that we'll return to, as you said, rational discourse?
I'm really not sure, because it's actually scary when stuff on social media starts having real world effects of canceled meetings and protests, and that is a scary phenomenon. It's happened in other places. It's happened in Canada before. So I think it's good that we're digging into the issue. I think people should dig into the issue. There are legitimate things to dig into in this plan. But look, let's step back for a second. This is a plan that looks forward 25 years. There is time to figure this out. There's time to debate and discuss this in a rational manner, and I sure hope that happens.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Marcy.
Cecil Rosner, Managing Editor at the Investigative Journalism Foundation. He is also author of Manipulating the Message, How Powerful Forces Shape the News. He's a former Managing Editor here at CBC Manitoba.
The CBC News app delivers the answers you want to know and need to know.
What an extraordinary scene.
The breaking stories that shape your world. Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
Dropping the 8 now. We're just approaching Gaza.
Your source for mobile news. Delivered when you want, where you want.
The situation has changed very quickly.
The CBC News app. Download for free.
8:24 a.m. Monday morning. Nice sunshine in downtown Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Brad Lillies, Chloe Friesen, and Sierra Sanders behind the glass. Megan Ketchison in the news center this morning. She'll have our next cast coming up at 8:30. Right now, speaking of news, residents of the Western community in Manitoba of McCreary are in shock and disbelief 4 people, as you have likely heard by now, were found dead there. That community is 250 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg, and the discovery was made on Friday morning. Mounties continue the investigation into the deaths of a 66-year-old woman and 2 men, aged 65 and 35. It's being investigated as a triple homicide. A 41-year-old man was also found dead from a self-inflicted injury. CBC Manitoba's Gavin Axelrod spoke to McCreary Reeve, Richard Sonnenberg, with some reaction about what happened here.
We feel terrible. The whole community feels terrible, and it's a horrible thing, and I'd like to express our deepest condolences to both the families for the grief they're experiencing today, and that's from the whole community. I think every community is the same. Nobody expects, you hear about it, you expect it not to happen in your community, but here we are, it's happened, and it's terrible. It's devastating for the whole community and for all the people involved.
And for you as a municipal leader, what's this like, having to navigate something like this?
It's terrible. It's something when I went in on council I never thought I would have to deal with. And knowing very well that something horrific can happen any time, but you just don't expect it.
A community, like we've been talking to people, and people are just in shock. What would your message be to people who are grieving and in shock right now?
Stay strong, and hopefully we can get some help for the people that need it here. There's been no statements made from the RCMP or anything yet, so we're just we'll wait in there, and when we hear from them, we'll try and whoever needs help, we'll get it for them.
Robert Brunel, Mayor of the municipality of St. Rose. Hearing the news out of McCreary was, quite shocking, and it's pretty close to home. Being our neighboring community, and there's a lot of ties between our communities, so it's definitely saddened and shocked to hear the devastating news. We're about 20-25 minutes apart. Rural communities, definitely the links between families and businesses, and where people work and commute to interact and play sports and all that, we're intertwined. So it's a very rare occurrence to have such a tragedy happen, and it definitely sends shockwaves throughout the community and the area, because we are all interconnected, and all community members that know each other.
That was Robert Brunel, the mayor of the municipality of St. Rose, speaking with CBC's Gavin Axelrod. We also heard from McCreary Reeve, Richard Sonnenberg. Now, John Scott is a McCreary resident who's lived in the town his entire life. He also spoke to Gavin about his shock over the news.
Well, it just shook up that it happened, like it's quite a tragedy. Never thought you'd ever see it happening here. You figure, well, it happened in Winnipeg or all the big centers, and here we are in this little community and got troubles, eh? Well, it was hard to believe at first. I was in Winnipeg. I had to go for an appointment, and we just heard it on the radio in Winnipeg, and I just, wow, what's going on here? But
So what's kind of like the talk of the town, I guess, today?
I can't say. I was up early, and I've been running the machine all over, but I would imagine it's a lot of what happened or what really got it going. Like, shakes you up, and hopefully they can get it to make sense what went on, but I don't know if you ever will. You'll never know for sure, will you? All this rural area, they know everybody right from when they were little kids. All the older people, they knew all the kids that grew up around here. And
What would you want people to know about the family that lived in this property?
Well, they're real nice people. They got along with everybody in the neighborhood. As far as I'm concerned, there was no issues with them guys. They were real nice people. That's about all I could say. They're real good people. It's going to take a long time to get over it. It'll be talked about for years and years.
That's McCreary resident John Scott in conversation with CBC's Gavin Axelrod about the discovery that was made on Friday morning. If you want to read more about the latest developments, you can go to cbc.ca/Manitoba. Of course, we are talking about the Mounties now investigating what they're calling a triple homicide. It is 8:28 a.m. on 89.3 FM. I'm Marcy Marcusa here on CBC. We've got news coming up in a few minutes from now, and then The Current will follow our show. They're going to be talking about the Democratic National Convention that kicks off today and goes all week down south. You're weighing in this morning, though, on something that might be, much closer to home, might even be in your backyard or up the street. We asked you this morning about the idea of safe play because of an article that has been written by our urban affairs and living correspondent, Ben Farr, who was in studio with us an hour ago, talking about kids and how, compared to previous generation, fewer kids are playing outside. And how can a city encourage kids to have more free play outside at a playground or somewhere else. And so you can read Ben's column online, but we asked you what your sense of that was like in your own life and in your own family. We got a number of comments on Facebook. Kelly Williams writing in, I agree with most of the reasons people have given, and people were writing in about technology and also a fear of people outside, just general fear of crime and such. But Kelly wanted to add another. Kelly writes, the new playground equipment that's being installed in parks looks fun, but it actually doesn't involve the same risk as the old ones. So my daughter gets excited to try it, but then she's disappointed every time because they're not as fun. The swings don't swing as high. There's no true monkey bars, and the slides are short. They are safe, less risk, I guess, but they're not as engaging. So I'd love to hear from you on this issue. My page, Marcy Marcus, acts as a show page when we're on the air. You can also call us anytime at 788-3205. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's mostly cloudy and 17. Mainly cloudy today. Chance of showers or thundershower and a high of 27. Some evacuees from Bonabona Cree Nation say they're in need of better accommodations. An out-of-control wildfire forced thousands out of their community last week. Hundreds have been displaced. Lorna Wienusk is one of many staying at the emergency shelter at the University of Winnipeg Recplex. She says it's been hard to get rest or privacy.
We want to go back home already. We're worried about our community and the people out here too, and they're kind of worried, and we need accommodations because it's been hectic for the past 2 days.
A sign outside the building posted by the Red Cross said a bus was taking 60 people to a hotel in Portage la Prairie yesterday. Another sign said a 10 p.m. curfew also came into effect last night, and no one was allowed in after that time. People in Recurry area are shaken after 4 people were found dead on Friday. RCMP are investigating a triple homicide. Police say the 4th person died of self-inflicted injuries. RCMP are expected to hear more about the investigation today. They say there is no risk to the public. Robert Burnell is the mayor of the neighboring community of St. Rose. He says it has rattled everyone in the region.
It's a very rare occurrence to have such a tragedy happen, and it definitely, sends shockwaves throughout the community and the area because we are all interconnected.
McCurry is 250 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. A raffle for a new home on a northern Manitoba First Nation isn't sitting well with everyone. Nisijawak Cree Nation bought a modular home for $200,000, and people who pay $150 for a ticket will have the chance to win it. Deputy Chief Marcel Moody says there's been criticism over the cost of the ticket, which some feel is out of reach for people in need of housing. But Moody thinks the cost is fair and says this is only one way leaders are trying to deal with the community's housing issues.
People may not agree with it, but I mean, it's also fun and exciting to see who wins, and maybe it's a single person, maybe it's a family of 6 or 7. But I mean, it's an opportunity for somebody. Hopefully, somebody who's in really desperate need for a home wins it.
Moody says the community is in need of 500 new homes. He says the draw is only open to NCN members and the home must remain in the community. He says money brought in from the ticket sales will go towards covering the cost of buying it. The Mystery Lake School Division is hoping to help students make a smooth transition after a fire last month destroyed their school. Officials believe the fire started in an electrical panel at Westwood Elementary School in Thompson. 2 other schools in the community will be welcoming displaced students this fall. Co-Superintendent Angel Bartlett says it'll be a hard adjustment for everyone.
But we're trying to make this transition for them as easy as we possibly can and be respectful of them and how difficult this is for them. I mean, you have teachers that have been in that building for 25 years. All their teaching materials, their own personal stuff has all been lost.
Grade 4 teacher Zoe Betras organized a school drive to help her colleagues rebuild their classrooms. An inquest into the death of a woman from Kingfisher Lake First Nation in Northern Ontario has wrapped up in Thunder Bay. The jury delivered its verdict on Friday, along with 42 recommendations aimed at improving health care services in remote communities. The CBC's Sarah Law has more.
Ruth Ann Queequish died of untreated, undiagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. She was 31 years old. Ontario Member of Parliament Saul Mamakwa is from Kingfisher Lake. He says her death speaks to the need for a better healthcare system that is run by First Nations themselves.
Give us those provincial resources, give us those federal resources, and let us run it on our own.
Kingfisher Lake is part of Anishinaabe-Aski Nation. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says the healthcare system is built, in his words, on colonial policies.
How racist this healthcare system that we're still subject to is, to me, that is the bottom line in terms of why Ruth Ann died.
The inquest jury recommended more healthcare workers, better access to medical records, and support for patient advocacy. There are also plans for a new nursing station in Kingfisher Lake. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, Megan Ketchison, thank you.
Thank you.
Megan's in this week for Heather Wells. And let's have a last look at what's happening in the weather and the commute with Chloe Friesen.
Hello. For the rest of the day today here in Winnipeg, forecasted to look like a mix of sun and cloud, hazy skies, a high of 27. With that humidex, though, feeling more like 32. And we're going to see that kind of continue through the rest of the week with that humidity here in the city of Winnipeg. Right now, it's 19 degrees at the Forks. We're seeing that similar humidity kind of across the province. So folks in Brandon, you're going to see a high of 30 and the humidex is 37. So if you're in that area of the province, just prepare for that weather. And when it comes to the commute, no calls on the commuter line today, which, you know what, that's great news on a Monday morning. But reminder, Shaftesbury Boulevard is closed between Wilkes and West Taylor for some rail work. That's until the end of the day on Saturday. And thank you very much for listening. I'm glad the commute was good and we had no calls.
Thanks, Chloe. Chloe Friesen going to be in all week for Corey, as well as Sierra Sanders in for Abby. Thank you, too. Thank you to Brad Lillies, who's been in with us this morning as well, and to our hardworking team of associate producers, as well as our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson, who's a senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. Just a reminder here, in Churchill, we are off the air, and that is for a couple of days. There's scheduled work being done. So I'm just putting that reminder out there in case you are wondering why, and you're in that area, maybe you're listening. You can maybe you're listening to static, but you can listen to us, of course. That's a reminder that you can go to the CBC Listen app anytime and listen to all of our local shows. So check it out. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Great to be back with you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. The Currents coming up next.